The north is cold and full of whispers.
The steps of the great Sept of Baelor stretched wide and white beneath the afternoon sun. Ned Stark knelt on the stone with his hands bound, his broken leg throbbing where Jaime Lannister's men had shattered it weeks ago during the ambush in the street. The pain was constant now, a grinding ache that made every movement agony. But the physical pain was nothing compared to what waited ahead. The plaza before the Sept was packed with thousands, small folk pressed shoulder to shoulder, their faces upturned, hungry for spectacle. They had come to see the great Lord Ned Stark of Winterfell confess his treason against the boy King Joffrey Baratheon. They had come to see him grovel and beg for mercy. High Septon stood on the platform beside Ned, his crystal crown catching the light. Queen Cersei watched from a shaded pavilion to the left, her face a mask of satisfaction. And on the Iron Throne's mobile seat, brought out specially for this occasion, sat Joffrey Baratheon himself, golden-haired and grinning. Sansa stood near her brother king, pale and trembling. Ned's heart twisted at the sight of his daughter. They had promised that if he confessed, Sansa would be spared, that he would be allowed to take the black and live out his days at the Wall. He had believed them because he had no choice, because Sansa's life hung in the balance. But looking at Joffrey's smile, Ned felt a cold certainty settle in his chest. The boy was Cersei's son in more than blood. He was cruel where she was calculating, vicious where she was controlled. And he had already shown his true nature when he ordered Ned's men slaughtered in the throne room, when he beat Sansa in court for sport. The promise was a lie. It had always been a lie. Lord Ned Stark, the High Septon intoned. His voice carried across the silent plaza. You stand accused of treason against your rightful king. You conspired to deny Prince Joffrey his throne. You plotted to seat the traitor Stannis Baratheon in his place. These crimes demand death. But in his mercy, King Joffrey has agreed to spare your life, if you confess your crimes before gods and men, and take the black to serve at the Wall for the remainder of your days. Ned opened his mouth. The confession sat on his tongue like poison. He had written it himself in his cell, every word a knife to his honor. But it would save Sansa. It would give his daughter a chance. Then he saw the executioner. Sir Ilan Payne stood to the right of the platform, ice Ned's own greatsword, the Valyrian steel blade of House Stark, held ready in his hands. The mute headsman's presence made no sense if Ned was meant for the Wall. You didn't need an executioner for a man taking vows. Understanding crashed over Ned like ice water. They were going to kill him anyway. The confession was theater. Joffrey wanted Ned to die dishonored, having admitted treason before the entire city. And then the boy king would take his head regardless of any promise. Ned's mind raced. He had seconds to decide. If he confessed, he died a traitor and Sansa remained a hostage to the Lannisters' mercy. Which was to say, no mercy at all. If he refused, they would kill him anyway, but at least he would die with his honor intact. Neither option saved his daughter. Neither option changed anything. Unless. The words came to Ned as if spoken by the old gods themselves, a memory from his fostering at the Eyrie, from lessons in Westerosi law given by Jon Arryn, in that same patient voice he used for everything. Trial by combat is the right of every accused man, high-born or low. The gods decide the issue between them. No king can deny it. Ned's heart hammered against his ribs. It was a desperate gambit. Suicidal, probably. But if he demanded trial by combat, the Lannisters would have to provide a champion. And if by some miracle Ned's champion won, if the gods truly decided the issue, then by law he would be acquitted. Completely. Irrevocably. The High Septon was still speaking. Confess your crimes before the Seven, and the king in his mercy shall. I demand trial by combat. Ned's voice rang out across the plaza, cutting through the High Septon's words like a blade. Silence crashed down. The High Septon stopped mid-sentence, his mouth open. Cersei sat forward in her pavilion, her green eyes narrowing. Joffrey's grin faltered. What? The boy king said. I invoke my right under the laws of the Seven Kingdoms, Ned said. His voice was stronger now, fed by the last reserves of strength in his broken body. I demand trial by combat. Let the gods decide my innocence or guilt. The plaza erupted. Thousands of voices rose in a wave of shock and excitement. The small folk had come for a confession. Now they might see a duel. Joffrey stood from his seat, his face flushing red. You have no right. You're a traitor. You... Every man accused has the right to trial by combat, Your Grace. The voice came from behind Ned, calm and measured. Ned turned his head as far as his position allowed, and saw Grand Maester Pycelle shuffling forward, his chains clinking. It is law, ancient law. Even kings must honor it. But he's crippled. Joffrey stabbed a finger at Ned's splinted leg. He can't fight. He can name a champion to fight in his stead, Pycelle said. His tone was careful, walking the line between counsel and correction. That too is law, Your Grace. She bent and whispered something in his ear. Ned couldn't hear the words, but he saw Joffrey's expression shift from rage to cunning. Very well, Joffrey said loudly. He was grinning again. Lord Stark may have his trial by combat. Let him name his champion, if he can find anyone foolish enough to die for a traitor. This was the flaw in Ned's plan. He had no champion. His household guard was dead, slaughtered in the throne room when Littlefinger's betrayal had sprung the trap. Jory Cassell, Aelin, Heward, all of them cut down by gold cloaks who had turned on Ned's command. The few Northmen in the city had fled or been arrested. Ned was alone. He looked at the crowd. Thousands of faces stared back, curious and pitiless. Small folk who cared nothing for northern lords or Lannister politics. They wanted blood and spectacle. They would get both when Ned failed to produce a champion and was executed for his presumption. But then, movement near the front of the crowd. A tall figure pushed forward through the press of bodies. The people parted reluctantly, grumbling, then fell silent as they recognized what they were seeing. An old man, lean and hard despite his years, with a face like weathered stone. His hair was pure white, worn long and bound at the nape of his neck. He wore a rough-spun cloak and simple traveler's clothes, but he moved with the economical grace of a man who had spent his entire life in armor. Ned's breath caught. Barristan Selmy. The old knight reached the edge of the platform and stopped. He looked up at Ned, and their eyes met. Ned had last seen Barristan 3 weeks ago, still in his white Kingsguard cloak, still serving Joffrey despite the boy's madness. But then Joffrey had dismissed him in open court, had stripped him of his cloak and position, had called him too old to serve, had cast aside the greatest living knight as if he were a used horse. The insult had shocked the entire court. Ned had seen the hurt in Barristan's eyes, even as the old knight maintained his dignity. Sir Barristan Selmy, called the bold Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, hero of a dozen battles and tourneys, dismissed like a servant. And now he was here, standing at the base of the steps, looking at Ned Stark with an expression that held something Ned had never seen in those blue eyes before. Resolution. I will stand for Lord Stark, Barristan said. His voice was not loud, but it carried. The plaza fell absolutely silent. I am Barristan Selmy, he continued, and now his voice rose, reaching every corner of the Sept's plaza. I served 3 kings. I wore the white cloak for 40 years, and I say before gods and men that Eddard Stark is a man of honor. I will be his champion. I will prove his innocence with my sword. Joffrey's face went from red to purple. You have no right. You were dismissed. You're not even a knight anymore. I am a knight, Your Grace. Barristan's tone was mild, but his words were steel. I was anointed by the High Septon himself when I was 10 and 6. That oath cannot be unmade by any man, not even a king, and the law says any willing knight may serve as champion for the accused. I am willing. I am able, and I claim that right. Grand Maester Pycelle cleared his throat. He is correct, Your Grace. Sir Barristan is legally entitled to serve as Lord Stark's champion. Ned saw her calculating, weighing options. She leaned close to Joffrey again, whispering urgently. Joffrey listened, his expression shifting. Then he smiled, a cold, cruel smile that made Ned's stomach turn. Very well, Joffrey said. Sir Barristan may be Lord Stark's champion, and I name Sir Gregor Clegane as the crown's champion. Let the gods decide. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Gregor Clegane, the mountain that rides, the largest, strongest, most feared warrior in the 7 kingdoms. A man who stood near 8 feet tall and had killed dozens of men in single combat. Ned looked at Barristan. The old knight was 61 years old. Ned knew this because they had spoken of it at the Hand's tourney, back when the world still made sense. 61 and lean as a willow, facing a monster in human form. But Barristan's face showed no fear, only that same steady resolution. I accept, Barristan said simply. They gave Ned a chair at the edge of the plaza, away from the royal pavilion. 2 gold cloaks stood guard, not to protect him, but to ensure he didn't flee. as if he could flee with a shattered leg. Sansa was allowed to approach. She knelt beside his chair, her eyes red from crying. "Father, what's happening? I don't understand." "Hush." Ned gripped her hand. "Listen to me carefully. Whatever happens today, you must survive. Do you understand? Smile for the Queen. Be courteous to Joffrey. Do whatever you must to stay alive. But the trial, if Sir Barristan wins, if he wins, I may be freed. But Sansa, you must not count on that. Gregor Clegane is—" Ned stopped. "How did you explain to a 12-year-old girl that the mountain was a creature of nightmare? That he had raped and murdered his way across the Riverlands? That he killed men the way other men swatted flies?" "Sir Barristan is very brave to fight for you," Sansa said quietly. "Yes, he is." Ned looked across the plaza to where Barristan stood with a septon, receiving a blessing. "I didn't expect it. Didn't think anyone would step forward." Why did he? Ned thought of conversations from weeks ago, of sitting in the small council chamber beside Barristan when Robert had ordered Daenerys Targaryen's assassination, of how Barristan had opposed it, quietly but firmly, and had looked at Ned with something like approval when Ned resigned the handship in protest. "Because he's a good man," Ned said. "And because he's tired of standing by while good men die." A commotion at the far end of the plaza announced Gregor Clegane's arrival. The Mountain came on horseback, the only horse in the city that could bear his weight. He wore full-plate armor, thick and dark, with a helm that made his already massive head look like a boulder. In his right hand he carried a greatsword that would have required 2 hands for any normal man. The blade was 6 feet of castle-forged steel, sharp enough to cleave through a horse's neck. The crowd parted before him like water before a ship's prow. People scrambled backward, terrified. Children cried. Women pulled their sons close, afraid even proximity to the mountain might bring death. Gregor dismounted. The ground seemed to shake when he landed. He was so tall that even standing on the plaza stones he could look down at mounted men. His armor was scarred from 100 fights, and through the eye slits of his helm, Ned could see small, cruel eyes that held no mercy and no fear. This was the man Tywin Lannister had used as a weapon across the Riverlands. The man who had burned the Mummers' Ford, who had sacked towns and hanged prisoners, who had raped Elia Martell and murdered her children during the sack of King's Landing. And now he would fight Barristan Selmy to decide Ned Stark's fate. Barristan walked to the center of the plaza. He wore no armor. There had been no time to fetch any. Instead, he wore a simple leather jerkin over wool, with mail beneath that someone in the crowd had produced. In his hands he carried a long sword and shield, both plain and serviceable. The contrast with Gregor's massive armaments was almost comical. Except nothing about this was funny. The High Septon raised his hands. The crowd fell silent. "Let the combatants face each other," the High Septon intoned. "Let them know that they fight under the eyes of the Seven. The Father shall judge them justly. The warrior shall grant strength to the righteous. The crone shall light their way with her lamp of wisdom. And the stranger," he paused, "the stranger shall take one of them to his dark halls before the sun sets. So it is decreed. So shall it be done." Barristan and Gregor faced each other across 20 feet of empty stone. "Begin," Joffrey said. His voice was eager, excited. Gregor charged. The mountain moved with shocking speed for something so massive. His greatsword swept in a horizontal arc meant to take Barristan's head off at the shoulders. Barristan wasn't there. He had moved before Gregor completed the swing, not backward, but to the side and slightly forward, inside the arc of the blade. His shield came up and deflected the following backswing. The impact sent him skidding 3 feet across the stone, his boots scraping, but he kept his footing. Gregor pressed forward, raining blows. Each swing of his greatsword came with the force of a falling tree. Barristan gave ground, his shield taking hit after hit. The shield was already dented, the leather straps straining. But Ned saw something the crowd didn't. Barristan wasn't just retreating. He was circling, drawing Gregor around, making the big man turn and adjust, making him work. Gregor's swings were devastating but not precise. He relied on strength and reach to overwhelm opponents. Barristan was studying that pattern, looking for the gap. The fourth swing caught Barristan's shield dead center. The force of it buckled the steel boss and tore the shield from Barristan's arm. The old knight let it go, spinning away and shifted his longsword to a 2-handed grip. Without the shield's weight, he was faster. Gregor lunged forward, stabbing with the greatsword's point. Barristan sidestepped, not far, just enough, and brought his sword down on Gregor's extended arm. The blade struck at the inside of the elbow, where the armor plates joined. The sound of steel on steel rang out, but there was another sound beneath it. A wet sound. Blood began to sheet down Gregor's sword arm. The mountain roared. The sound was inhuman. A bull's bellow of rage, he wheeled and swung his greatsword in a massive overhead blow meant to split Barristan from crown to crotch. Barristan was already moving. He stepped forward and to the left, passing along Gregor's weak side, the wounded arm. His longsword snapped out in a precise thrust that caught Gregor in the armpit, finding the gap where the armor didn't quite cover. Gregor's bellow turned to a scream. He dropped the greatsword and grabbed for Barristan with his good hand, those massive hands that could crush a man's skull like a melon. But Barristan had already danced back out of reach. Blood dripped from his sword. Both wounds he'd inflicted were bleeding steadily, soaking Gregor's armor. The crowd was screaming. Half of them were cheering for Barristan. The other half were screaming for Gregor to kill him. The noise was deafening. Gregor bent and retrieved his greatsword with his offhand. His right arm hung useless, blood pooling on the stones beneath him. But he was far from beaten. He had killed men with worse wounds than this. He advanced on Barristan. More cautious now, his greatsword held in a defensive position, waiting for an opening. Barristan gave him one, or seemed to. He feinted left, then right, and Gregor's blade followed. When Barristan committed to a forward lunge, Gregor was ready. The greatsword came down in a vertical slash aimed at Barristan's head. Barristan dropped to one knee and rolled forward beneath the blade. He came up inside Gregor's guard, too close for the greatsword to matter, and drove his longsword into the back of Gregor's knee, the same precise targeting, the same knowledge of where armor was weakest. The mountain's leg buckled. He crashed to one knee, his armor clanging against stone, and Barristan, moving with a speed that seemed impossible for a man of 60, one circled behind him and thrust his blade through the gap between helm and gorget. The longsword's point punched through mail and flesh and came out the other side of Gregor's throat. The mountain made a choking, gurgling sound. He reached up with his good hand to grab the blade, but his strength was already fading. His massive body swayed. Barristan pulled his sword free and stepped back. Gregor Clegane, the mountain that rides, toppled forward onto his face and lay still. Blood spread in a dark pool around his head. The plaza was absolutely silent. Then someone in the crowd screamed, a woman's voice, high and triumphant, "Barristan! Barristan the Bold! Barristan! Barristan!" He was breathing hard, his face pale, and Ned could see pain in the way he held his left arm against his ribs. But he was standing. He was alive. Barristan turned and looked at Joffrey. "The gods have spoken, Your Grace," he said. Joffrey's face was twisted with rage. He looked at Cersei, who sat frozen in her pavilion, then at Grand Maester Pycelle, who was staring at Gregor's corpse with his mouth open. "The gods have spoken," Barristan repeated. His voice was steady. "Lord Eddard Stark is innocent. By the laws of gods and men, he must be freed." His hand went to his sword, a pretty useless ornament he wore for show. "I am the king, I say." "You say nothing." The voice came from behind Ned. Ned turned his head and saw a man in Septon's robes approaching the platform. He was older than the High Septon, his face deeply lined, his eyes sharp. Ned recognized him, one of the most devout, the High Council of the Faith. "Trial by combat is the law of the Seven Kingdoms," the Septon said. He spoke loudly enough for the crowd to hear. "It has been the law for thousands of years. No king may overturn it. To do so would be to defy the gods themselves." He looked directly at Joffrey. "The gods have judged Lord Stark innocent, Your Grace. You must release him." There was an edge to it now, a warning. These people had just watched the gods decide. If Joffrey tried to overturn that decision, he would be declaring himself above the gods. Cersei rose and moved to Joffrey's side. She whispered in his ear, her expression controlled. Whatever she said, it made Joffrey's shoulders slump. "Fine," Joffrey spat. "Lord Stark is free. The gods have spoken." He practically choked on the words. Then he pointed at Barristan. "But you assaulted the crown's champion. You fought in a trial by combat at the crown's own invitation," Barristan said calmly. "That is hardly assault, Your Grace." Joffrey's face went purple. He looked like he was about to scream. Then Cersei touched his arm and shook her head very slightly. "Get him out of my sight," Joffrey said. He turned and stalked away from the platform toward his litter. Cersei lingered a moment longer. She looked at Ned with those green eyes, and Ned saw cold calculation there. Sansa remains in the Red Keep, she said quietly, as a guest of the crown, until arrangements can be made. The message was clear. Ned could leave, but his daughter was still a hostage. Insurance against whatever Ned might say or do. Ned met her gaze. I understand. Good. Cersei swept away, following Joffrey. The gold cloaks who had been guarding Ned stepped back, uncertain. The crowd was pressing closer now, cheering, chanting. Some were calling Ned's name alongside Barristan's. Barristan walked to Ned's chair. Up close, Ned could see the cost of the fight. The old knight's face was gray with pain, and he held his left arm tight against his ribs. Blood seeped through his jerkin from a wound Ned hadn't seen him take. Can you walk? Barristan asked. Not well, my leg. I'll find help. Barristan looked around and spotted a group of men near the edge of the crowd. He beckoned them over. You there. Help Lord Stark to his feet. Carefully, his leg is broken. The men came forward, not gold cloaks, but common citizens. They helped Ned stand, supporting his weight. The pain in his leg flared white-hot. Where? One of the men asked. Ned thought fast. He couldn't go back to the Red Keep. Cersei controlled it completely now. The Tower of the Hand had been occupied by Lannisters since his arrest. He needed somewhere safe, somewhere he could regroup and think. The harbor, Ned said. Take me to the docks. There are ships there. Northern ships if we're lucky. There's a better place. The voice came from Ned's right. A small man in black clothing pushed through the crowd. Ned recognized him. Yoren, a recruiter for the Night's Watch. They had spoken briefly weeks ago. I've got a wagon, Yoren said, and horses was meant to leave today with recruits for the wall. But I can wait one more day. He looked at Ned. Lord Stark, you're hurt bad. You need rest and healing before you go anywhere. I've got a place, an inn near Flea Bottom. Nobody'll look for you there. Why would you help me? Ned asked. Because you're Ned Stark of Winterfell. Because your brother Benjen is first ranger of the Night's Watch. And because Yoren spat. Because fuck the Lannisters. That's why. Your place, then. And Yoren. I have a daughter. She's somewhere in the city, if you can find her. Arya. 9 years old. Dark hair. Likely dressed as a commoner if she's smart. Ned's throat tightened. She ran when my men were slaughtered. I don't know where she went. I'll find her. Yoren looked at Barristan. You coming too, sir? I am. Barristan glanced back at the Great Sept, at the steps where Gregor's body still lay. I have nowhere else to go. Yoren's place was a run-down inn in the shadow of Flea Bottom, called the Stinking Goose. The common room smelled of old beer and unwashed bodies. But the innkeeper, a scarred woman named Masha, took one look at Ned and Barristan and asked no questions. She simply showed them to a back room and promised to bring food and water. They laid Ned on a straw mattress. The pain in his leg had become a constant throb that made thinking difficult. Barristan sat heavily on a stool, finally allowing himself to show the strain of the fight. Let me see that wound, Ned said, gesturing to where blood had soaked through Barristan's jerkin. Barristan pulled the jerkin aside. A cut ran along his ribs, not deep, but long. It had bled freely during the fight, but was clotting now. I'll need to bind it, Ned said, to prevent infection. Later. Barristan looked at Ned. We need to talk about what happens next. Next? Ned shifted on the mattress, trying to find a position that didn't make his legs scream. I'm free. By law, I'm innocent. But Cersei still has Sansa. That makes me vulnerable, Barristan finished. Yes, as long as your daughter is a hostage, the Lannisters have leverage over you. He paused. There's also the matter of what you know, what you discovered before your arrest. Ned looked at him sharply. What makes you think I discovered anything? I know when something is wrong. Barristan's blue eyes were steady. Jon Arryn was investigating something before he died, asking questions, going places a hand of the king had no reason to go. And you continued that investigation after you became Hand. Ned said nothing. I stood beside you in the small council when Robert ordered the Targaryen girl's assassination, Barristan continued. I heard you oppose it, and I saw you resign when Robert wouldn't listen. That took courage. He leaned forward. I also saw how Cersei looked at you after that, like you were a problem to be solved, a threat to be eliminated. You're fishing, Ned said. I'm connecting pieces. Barristan's voice was gentle but insistent. Whatever you discovered, It was dangerous enough that the Lannisters arrested you, dangerous enough that they wanted you to confess to treason, to die dishonored, discredited, which means it's something they desperately want buried. Ned studied the old knight's face. He saw no deception there, only concern and a kind of weary determination. I can't tell you, Ned said finally. Not because I don't trust you, gods know you just saved my life, but because the knowledge itself is dangerous. The fewer people who know, the safer they are, even if that knowledge could bring down the Lannisters, especially then. Ned met his gaze. Barristan, you fought for me today. You risked your life. I won't repay that by putting you in more danger. Barristan was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded. I understand. But Ned, may I call you Ned? You've earned that right. Ned, then. You need to leave King's Landing. Soon. Tonight, if possible. The trial by combat was legal, but legality doesn't matter if you're dead. Cersei will not forgive this. She will find a way to kill you that doesn't break the law. An accident, a robbery gone wrong, a poisoned meal. She's very good at making murders look like natural causes. I can't leave without Sansa. I know, and I don't know how we get her out of the Red Keep without triggering an immediate response. Barristan rubbed his face tiredly. But we need a plan. We need... Yoren entered, and behind him came a small figure in a rough-spun dress. Arya? Ned tried to sit up and gasped as his leg protested. The girl ran across the room and threw herself at him. Ned caught her, ignoring the pain, and held her tight. She was filthy and thin, and her hair had been hacked short, but she was alive. She was here. I thought you were dead, Arya said into his chest. I saw them take you. I saw... She stopped, her small body shaking. I'm alive. Thanks to Sir Barristan. Ned looked up at Yoren. Where did you find her? Near the Dragon Gate, trying to slip past the gold cloaks. Yoren grinned. Recognized her from your description. Feisty little thing. Tried to stab me with a stick when I grabbed her. Ned almost laughed. That sounds like Arya. Arya pulled back and looked at Barristan. You're Barristan the Bold. I saw you fight. You killed the Mountain. I did. That was amazing. Her gray eyes were wide. How did you move so fast? You're old, Arya, Ned said sharply. But Barristan smiled. A real smile, the first Ned had seen from him. I am old, but I've been fighting since before your father was born. You learn a few things in 60 years. Masha arrived with bread, cheese, and ale. They ate in silence for a few minutes, the hunger of the day's ordeal taking precedence over conversation. Finally, Ned spoke. We need to get out of the city. All of us. Tonight, if possible. You can barely walk, Barristan said. Then I'll ride in Yoren's wagon, or we'll find a litter. But Barristan, you were right. Cersei won't stop. Trial by combat bought me hours at most, maybe a day. She'll send men, professional killers. Where will you go? Yoren asked. North, to Winterfell. Ned looked at his daughter. To safety. The King's Road will be watched, Barristan said. Gold cloaks at every gate, likely with orders to stop you. Then we go by ship, around Crackclaw Point to White Harbor. Ned had already been thinking this through. Lord Manderly is loyal to House Stark. Once we reach his harbor, we're under northern protection. Ships cost gold, Yoren said. I have some. Ned touched the pouch at his belt, still there, surprisingly, after weeks in the dungeons. And if it's not enough, Lord Manderly will cover the rest once we arrive. Her voice was small. We can't leave her. No, we can't. Ned's heart ached. But we also can't get her out of the Red Keep. Not tonight, not with the city on alert. He looked at Barristan. I need to make a choice. Stay and try to rescue Sansa, which will fail, and get all of us killed. Or leave now, regroup, and come back for her when I'm stronger. When I have an army. That's not a choice, Arya said fiercely. That's just leaving her. I know. Ned pulled her close again. And it's killing me. But Arya, Sansa is in the Red Keep. She's visible. They can't just make her disappear without questions. As long as she's a hostage, they'll keep her alive and reasonably well treated. She has value. You're going to let them keep her, Arya said. Not a question. An accusation. I'm going to stay alive long enough to bring her home, Ned said. That's all I can do right now. Arya said nothing. She just pressed her face against his chest and held on. Barristan stood, wincing. I'll go to the docks. Find a ship sailing north, someone who'll take passengers for the right price. You're coming with us, Ned asked. Where else would I go? Barristan smiled faintly. I'm dismissed from the Kingsguard, persona non grata in King's Landing. And I just killed the Lannisters' champion in front of thousands of witnesses. Yes, Lord Stark. I'm coming north with you. Yoren followed, saying he needed to gather his recruits and prepare the wagon. Ned was alone with Arya in the dim room. His daughter had fallen asleep against him. Exhausted, he stroked her hair, what was left of it, and stared at the ceiling. He was alive. Against all odds, against all expectation, the gods had judged him innocent, and Barristan Selmy had made that judgment reality. But Sansa was still a prisoner. The truth about Joffrey's parentage was still buried, and Ned was fleeing the city like a thief in the night, broken and defeated. This wasn't victory, this was survival, and Ned would take it. He would go north. He would heal. He would gather his strength and his allies, and then, gods help him, he would come back for his daughter. They left King's Landing 2 hours before dawn. Yoren had found a fishing boat willing to take passengers, a battered vessel called the Merry Midwife, captained by a grizzled sailor named Casso, who asked no questions when Yoren showed him silver. The ship smelled of old fish and salt rot, but it had a small cabin below decks where Ned could lie down, and that was enough. Getting Ned from the stinking goose to the harbor had been an ordeal. Yoren's wagon carried him as far as the docks, but the final stretch required 2 of Yoren's recruits to carry Ned on a makeshift litter. Every jostle sent white-hot pain through his shattered leg. By the time they laid him on the cabin's narrow bunk, Ned was gray-faced and sweating despite the cool night air. Barristan came aboard last, moving carefully. His ribs were bound now. Masha had done it before they left, wrapping linen tight around his torso. The wound along his side had stopped bleeding, but Ned could see pain in the way the old knight held himself. Arya sat in the corner of the cabin, her knees drawn up, watching everything with those sharp gray eyes. She hadn't spoken since they left the inn. Ned knew she was angry about leaving Sansa behind. He didn't blame her. The Merry Midwife cast off as the eastern sky began to lighten. They slipped out of Blackwater Bay with the morning tide, the great city of King's Landing growing smaller behind them, until it was just a dark smudge on the horizon. Ned lay on the bunk and tried not to think about his daughter still trapped in the Red Keep. Tried not to imagine what Cersei might do to her now that Ned had escaped. The Queen had promised Sansa would remain a guest, but promises from Cersei Lannister were worth less than air. You're thinking about her, Barristan said quietly. He sat on a stool near the cabin door, keeping watch. I can't stop. She's valuable to them. As long as that's true, they'll keep her alive. Barristan's voice was steady, reassuring. Cersei is many things, but she's not stupid. Killing Sansa would turn you from a defeated enemy into a vengeful one. She won't risk that. You don't know Joffrey. The boy is... Ned stopped, searching for words. There's something broken in him. He beat Sansa in open court for sport. He had my men slaughtered after promising them mercy. He's capable of anything, which is why Cersei will keep him away from her. The Queen knows what her son is. Barristan shifted on the stool, wincing. I served in the Kingsguard for 40 years, Ned. I watched Aerys Targaryen descend into madness. I saw what unchecked cruelty looks like. Joffrey is walking that same path, and Cersei knows it. She'll control him where she can, and where she can't. Barristan had no answer for that. The voyage up the coast took 14 days. The Merry Midwife was built for fishing the Blackwater, not open ocean, and Captain Casso hugged the coastline, putting in at small harbors every few nights to resupply and wait out storms. They passed Crack Claw Point on the 3rd day, the rocky headland jutting into the narrow sea like a broken fist. Then north past the Fingers, that collection of rocky peninsulas where Littlefinger's family held a small, poor keep. Littlefinger, the thought of him made Ned's hands clench, the man who had put a dagger to his throat in the throne room, who had smiled and said, I did warn you not to trust me, before the gold cloaks turned on Ned's men, who had orchestrated the whole betrayal with such casual efficiency. Ned had trusted him, had believed that Petyr Baelish, who grew up with Catelyn, who claimed to love her still, would help House Stark out of that old affection. The betrayal burned deeper than any wound. You're thinking about Littlefinger, Barristan said one evening as they sat on deck watching the sunset. Arya was below, sleeping. The old knight seemed to have an uncanny ability to read Ned's thoughts. How did you know? You get a certain look, like you want to kill someone, slowly. Barristan smiled faintly. I had the same look for years after I let Eris burn your father and brother. Anger at yourself is the worst kind. I should have seen it. Should have known he'd betray me. Why? Because he grew up with your wife? Barristan shook his head. That's not how men like Littlefinger think. They don't have loyalties, only interests. You had nothing he wanted. The Lannisters did. He wants the Iron Throne, Ned said quietly, or something close to it. Power, influence, all the things he was denied as a minor lord's youngest son. Then he picked the wrong side. The Lannisters are powerful, but they're not invincible. Barristan looked at Ned. You survived, Ned. That's more than Littlefinger planned for. And now you can do what he never expected. Fight back. With what? I'm alone. My men are dead. My daughters are hostages. I'm fleeing to Winterfell with a broken leg and no army. You have the North. 20,000 men if you call the banners. More if you give them time to muster. Barristan's voice was firm. And you have something else. Something the Lannisters fear. What? The truth. Ned looked at him sharply. I told you. You told me the knowledge was dangerous. That you wouldn't share it to keep me safe. Barristan leaned forward. But Ned, we're past that now. We're both marked men. The Lannisters will hunt us whether we know their secrets or not. So tell me, what did you discover that made them arrest the hand of the king? The ship rocked beneath them, the sail snapping in the wind. Finally, he spoke. Joffrey isn't Robert's son. Barristan went very still. What? None of them are. Not Joffrey. Not Myrcella. Not Tommen. They're all. Ned's voice dropped to barely a whisper. They're Jaime Lannister's children. Cersei's been sleeping with her twin brother for years. All three of the royal children are bastards born of incest. His face had gone pale. You're certain? He finally asked. Yes. Jon Arryn discovered it first. That's why he was killed. Cersei poisoned him before he could tell Robert. I continued his investigation. The evidence is overwhelming. What evidence? Every bastard Robert has ever sired has black hair. Maya Stone in the Vale. Gendry in King's Landing. Bara at the brothel. All of them with Baratheon black hair. The seed is strong. That's what they say about his bloodline. It dominates in every union. Ned's voice was bitter, except the Queen's children. All three of them golden-haired, green-eyed Lannisters. Not a trace of Robert in any of them. Barristan rubbed his face with both hands. Gods. The throne, the succession, everything is built on a lie. Yes. Does anyone else know? Stannis Baratheon. I sent him a letter before my arrest, telling him what I'd found. He's Robert's true heir, now that the royal children are revealed as bastards. Ned paused. And Cersei knows that I know. That's why she had me arrested. That's why she wanted me to confess to treason and die, so the secret would die with me, discredited. But you didn't confess. You demanded trial by combat instead. Barristan's eyes were sharp. And now you're free, with the knowledge intact, with the ability to spread it. If anyone will believe me, I'm a disgraced lord fleeing the capital. The Lannisters will call me a liar and a traitor trying to save his own skin. They'll call you that regardless of what you say. Barristan stood pacing the small deck. But Ned, this changes everything. If you can prove the royal children are bastards, Joffrey has no claim to the throne. The succession passes to Stannis. I have genealogical records. I have the observations about hair color. But that's all circumstantial. The only people who know the truth for certain are Cersei and Jaime, and they're not going to confess. What about Robert? Does he know? No. I tried to tell him before he went on that last hunt, the one where he was gored by the boar, but he was already dying when I reached him. I never got the chance. Ned's throat tightened. He died believing Joffrey was his son, believing his legacy was secure. Barristan was quiet. Robert was my friend. We fought together in the rebellion. I served him for 15 years. He looked at Ned. If he had lived, if he had learned the truth, what would he have done? Killed them all? Cersei, Jaime, the children. He would have seen it as a repeat of the Targaryen threat, another instance of a family trying to steal his throne through deception. Ned's voice was bleak. And he would have been within his rights. Incest is treason. Putting bastards in the line of succession is treason. The penalty for both is death. Even for the children? Robert approved the murder of Rhaegar's children after the sack of King's Landing. Called it justice when Tywin presented him with their bodies wrapped in Lannister crimson. Ned looked at Barristan. He would have killed Joffrey, Myrcella, and Tommen without hesitation. And part of me, the part that's angry and hurt and wants vengeance, thinks he would have been right to do it. And the other part remembers that they're children, that they didn't choose their parents, that Myrcella is sweet and Tommen is gentle, and even Joffrey might have been different if he'd been raised by someone other than Cersei. Ned shook his head. I don't know what to do about them, but I know what I have to do about Joffrey's claim to the throne. Support Stannis. Yes, he's Robert's true heir. The throne passes to him by law. Ned paused. The question is whether the realm will accept it, whether they'll believe me when I say Joffrey is a bastard, whether they'll follow Stannis instead of the boy who's already sitting the Iron Throne. They'll follow strength, Barristan said. And the truth, if it's presented properly. You're not just any lord making accusations. You're Eddard Stark of Winterfell, the man who served as Hand of the King, the man Robert Baratheon trusted above all others. And you were just acquitted by trial by combat. The gods themselves declared you innocent of treason. He smiled slightly. Your testimony carries weight, Ned, more than you realize. Then I'll use it. Once I reach Winterfell, once I've healed and gathered my strength. Ned looked north toward home. I'll declare for Stannis. I'll call the northern banners, and I'll march south with an army to take back my daughter and seat the rightful king on the Iron Throne. That's war. But it's a war that's already started. The Lannisters won't let this stand. They'll come after me, after the North, to silence me before I can spread the truth about Joffrey. War is coming whether I want it or not. Barristan nodded slowly. Then we'd better be ready for it. They reached White Harbor on the 14th day. The city sprawled along the mouth of the White Knife River, its walls gleaming white in the afternoon sun. The Manderley fleet filled the harbor, trading cogs, fishing boats, and warships flying the green and white merman of House Manderley. It was the largest city in the north, the richest port, and the seat of House Stark's most powerful bannerman. Lord Wyman Manderley met them at the docks himself. The Lord of White Harbor was enormous, easily the fattest man Ned had ever seen, his bulk requiring 2 servants to help him walk. But his eyes were sharp and his mind sharper. He took one look at Ned being carried off the merry midwife on a litter, and his round face went grim. Lord Stark, Wyman said, we heard rumors you were dead, executed in King's Landing for treason. The rumors were premature, Ned said. He managed a weak smile. I demanded trial by combat. Sir Barristan Selmy served as my champion and defeated Gregor Clegane. The gods judged me innocent. Wyman's eyebrows rose. Barristan the Bold fought for you. I did, my lord, Barristan said. He stepped forward and bowed. And I would be honored if House Manderley would grant us shelter while Lord Stark recovers from his injuries. Honored? Sir Barristan, it's White Harbor that would be honored to host you. Wyman gestured to his servants. Take Lord Stark to the new castle. Give him the best chambers we have. Send for Maester Themor. Lord Stark's leg needs proper attention. He looked at Arya. And the young lady. My daughter Arya, Ned said. She's had a hard journey, I can see. We'll get her fed and bathed and into proper clothes. Wyman's expression softened. You're safe now, all of you. House Manderley stands with House Stark. Always. They were carried through the city to the new castle, Wyman's seat. It was a massive structure of white stone and green-tiled roofs, built in an unusual style with more windows than any northern castle needed. Inside, servants bustled to prepare chambers and bring food and summon the maester. Maester Theomore was a thin, efficient man who examined Ned's leg with careful hands and a worried expression. The bone was set poorly, he said after several minutes of prodding that made Ned grit his teeth. It's begun to heal, but not straight. I'll need to re-break it and set it properly, or you'll walk with a pronounced limp for the rest of your life. Do what you must, Ned said. The procedure was agony. They gave Ned milk of the poppy first, but it only dulled the pain, didn't eliminate it. He felt the bone snap, felt Themor's hands manipulating the fragments back into alignment, felt the splints being tied tight. He passed out halfway through and woke hours later with his leg immobilized and throbbing. Arya sat beside his bed, her face pale. You screamed, she said quietly. I heard you from 2 rooms away. I'm sorry you had to hear that. I'm glad you're getting fixed. She touched his hand carefully. Maester Theomore says you'll be able to walk again, properly, in a few months. Ned closed his eyes. That's a long time. We're safe here. Lord Manderley said so. Arya paused. And Sir Barristan is standing guard outside your door. Nobody's getting past him. Good. Ned squeezed her hand. Arya? I need you to do something for me. What? To your mother at River Run. Tell her I'm alive. Tell her we're safe in White Harbor. And tell her, he paused. Tell her to have your grandfather call the Riverlands banners. War is coming. Arya's eyes went wide. War? Yes. The Lannisters won't forgive what happened at the trial. They'll come after us, after the North, to silence me. We need to be ready. He looked at his daughter. Can you write the letter? In your best hand? Yes. Arya stood. I'll do it now. She left. Ned lay in the bed and stared at the ceiling, his mind already working through what came next. He needed to send ravens to all the major northern houses. Karstark, Umber, Mormont, Bolton. All of them needed to know he was alive and to prepare for war. He needed to contact Stannis Baratheon and coordinate their movements. Stannis had the fleet, the legitimacy, and his own grudge against the Lannisters. Together, they could present a united front. And he needed to plan for Sansa. Getting her out of King's Landing would require more than just an army. It would require subtlety, timing, and probably negotiation. She was Cersei's insurance policy. The Queen wouldn't give her up easily. The door opened. Barristan entered, moving carefully, his hand on his ribs. How are you? Ned asked. Sore? Maester Theomore says I cracked 2 ribs during the fight. They'll heal, but it'll take time. Barristan sat in the chair Arya had vacated. How are you? In pain, but the Maester says I'll walk again, so I'll take that. Ned paused. We need to talk about what happens next. I know. I've been thinking about it. Barristan leaned forward. You're planning to declare for Stannis and call the northern banners. That's the right move. But Ned, you need to think about your son. He's safe at Winterfell. For now. But when word reaches him that you're alive and declaring war on the Lannisters, what do you think he'll do? Ned hadn't thought that far ahead. He'll want to join me. To fight. He'll want to lead, Barristan corrected. He's your eldest son, your heir. And from what you've told me, he's nearly a man grown, 17 years old, the same age Robert was when he started his rebellion. Robb isn't ready for war. Neither was Robert. Neither were you, for that matter. You were only 19 at the Trident. Barristan's voice was gentle. But war doesn't wait for you to be ready, and Robb will want to fight for his family, for his father. You can't stop that. I can order him to stay at Winterfell, and he might obey. Or he might call the banners himself and march south anyway. Barristan met Ned's eyes. You need to think about this, Ned. About how to use Robb's energy and loyalty without getting him killed. Because if he rides to war unprepared, he will die, and you'll lose your son along with everything else. The words hit Ned like a blow. He thought of Robb, strong, brave, impulsive Robb, who looked so much like Catelyn with his auburn hair and blue eyes, who wanted so badly to prove himself worthy of being Ned's heir. What do you suggest? Ned asked. Keep him close. When you're strong enough to travel to Winterfell, bring him into your councils. Teach him strategy, logistics, the realities of command. Let him lead men, but under your supervision. Don't shelter him, but don't throw him into the fire either. Barristan paused. And if the war goes badly, if the Lannisters push north, have a plan to get him out, to keep the Stark line alive. You're talking about defeat. I'm talking about prudence. You're about to fight the richest house in Westeros. They have more gold, more soldiers, more allies than you do. You might win, probably will win, if you're smart about it, but you might not. And if you don't, someone needs to survive to rebuild. Ned nodded slowly. You sound like you've thought about this before. I served in Robert's rebellion. I watched good men make bad decisions, because they didn't plan for failure. I watched the Targaryens fall because they assumed their dragons and their legacy made them invincible. Barristan's voice was quiet. I won't watch you make the same mistake. The raven from Winterfell arrived 3 days later. Ned was sitting up in bed, his legs still immobilized, but the pain manageable with the Maester's potions, when Wyman Manderley brought the message personally. From your son, Wyman said, handing over the rolled parchment. He's calling the banners. He unrolled the message and read Rob's hasty scrawl. Father, word reached us that you were arrested in King's Landing. Then word came that you demanded trial by combat and were freed. Now rumors say the Lannisters are calling you a traitor and ordering your arrest. I've called the Northern Banners. Every house from the wall to the neck. We'll have 20,000 men in a fortnight. More if we wait. I'm marching south to River Run to join with Grandfather's forces. Together we'll have enough strength to face the Lannisters. Mother is in River Run. She'll meet us there. Bran and Rickon stay at Winterfell with Maester Luwin and the household guard. We're coming for you, Father. We're coming for Sansa. And we're going to make the Lannisters pay for what they did. Rob. Ned read the letter twice, his heart sinking further with each word. He's already marching? Ned asked. According to my scouts, yes. He left Winterfell 5 days ago with an advance force. The main army will follow once the banners have fully assembled. Wyman's face was sympathetic. Your son is young and eager, Lord Stark, and he loves you. Of course he's marching. He's marching into a war he doesn't understand, against an enemy he's never faced. Ned crumpled the letter in his fist. I need to stop him. You need to heal, Barristan said from the doorway. And then you need to join him. Because you're right, Rob doesn't understand what he's facing. But if you're there to guide him, to lead him, you can turn his passion into something useful instead of suicidal. I can't even walk. You will walk. In a few weeks, Maester Themor says. And in the meantime, you can send ravens. You can coordinate with Stannis. You can plan the strategy that Rob will execute when you reach him. Barristan moved into the room. This isn't ideal, Ned. But it's what we have. Your son has started a war. Now we have to make sure he survives it. Ned looked at the crumpled letter in his hand. Rob was marching to war. Catelyn was at River Run, probably terrified for her family. Sansa was still a hostage in King's Landing. Arya was safe but traumatized. Bran and Rickon were children being left behind at Winterfell. His family was scattered across Westeros, caught in a conflict that was about to consume the entire realm. And it had all started because Ned had discovered the truth about 3 children who weren't Robert Baratheon's heirs. We need to send a raven to Stannis, Ned said. Today, tell him I'm alive and that I'm declaring for him. Tell him the North is calling its banners and will support his claim to the throne. What about the truth? Barristan asked. About Joffrey's parentage. Include it in the message. Stannis already knows. I sent him a letter weeks ago, but we need to coordinate how we reveal it to the realm. If we both declare it at the same time, from different locations, it's harder for the Lannisters to dismiss as lies. Ned looked at Wyman. Can you send a raven to Dragonstone? Consider it done, my lord. And to River Run, tell my wife I'm alive and healing. Tell her Arya is safe. And tell her, Ned's voice caught. Tell her I'm sorry about Sansa. That I'll get her back, no matter what it takes. Wyman nodded and left to send the ravens. Barristan sat in the chair beside Ned's bed. This is it, then. The point of no return. Once those ravens fly, you're committed to war. The war started the moment the Lannisters arrested me. I'm just finally fighting back. Ned looked at the old knight. You don't have to stay, you know. This is my fight. My family. You've already done more than anyone could ask. I killed the Lannisters' champion in front of half of King's Landing. I'm as much a target as you are. Barristan smiled faintly. Besides, I told you, I'm tired of standing by while good men die. If there's going to be a war to put the rightful king on the throne, I want to be part of it. One last fight, one last chance to do the right thing. You're 61 years old with cracked ribs, and you're barely 40 with a broken leg. We're a fine pair. Barristan's smile widened. But we're alive, Ned. Against all odds, we're alive. And that means we still have a chance to win. 2 weeks passed. Ned's leg healed slowly. Maester Themor removed the splints after 10 days and declared the bone was setting properly. Ned could stand now, though he needed a cane and couldn't put full weight on the leg. Walking was an exercise in gritted teeth determination. Arya spent her days training in the yard with the Manderley guards. They'd given her a proper sword. Not the needle-thin blade she'd lost in King's Landing, but a practice sword sized for a child. She attacked the training posts with a ferocity that made the guards shake their heads in wonder. Barristan's ribs healed faster. By the end of the 2nd week he was moving normally again, though he still winced when he twisted too quickly. He spent his time drilling with the Manderley knights, showing them techniques they'd never seen. correcting their forms with the patience of a master teacher. The ravens returned with answers. From Stannis Baratheon at Dragonstone. Lord Stark, your survival is welcome news. I have received your declaration of support and accept it. The North's strength will be critical in the coming conflict. I have known the truth about Cersei's children for months. Jon Arryn and I investigated together before his death. I have been preparing to press my claim as Robert's rightful heir, but I lacked the military strength to challenge the Lannisters directly. With the North at my back, that changes. I am sending ravens to every lord in the Seven Kingdoms, declaring Joffrey, Myrcella, and Tommen bastards born of incest. I am claiming the Iron Throne as Robert's true heir by law, and I am calling on all loyal lords to support my claim. Your testimony regarding the incest will be crucial. The realm must hear from Robert's closest friend, from the man he trusted above all others, that the royal children are impostors. We will coordinate our campaigns. My fleet will control the narrow sea and prevent Lannister reinforcements from reaching King's Landing by water. Your army will advance from the north and pin them in the Riverlands. Together, we will crush them. Justice will be done. Stannis Baratheon, by right of birth, Lord of the Seven Kingdoms. Ned read the letter 3 times. Stannis was moving fast, faster than Ned had expected. The man was nothing if not decisive. From Catelyn at Riverrun, Ned, when word reached us that you'd been arrested, I feared the worst. When we heard about the trial by combat, I prayed to every god I know. And now you're safe, and Arya is safe, and I thank the Seven for that mercy. But Sansa, Ned, we have to get her out of there. Cersei will use her against us, against you. As long as our daughter is a hostage, we're vulnerable. Father has called the Riverlands banners. We'll have 15,000 men in a fortnight. Robb is marching here with the Northern Army. When they arrive, we'll have enough strength to challenge the Lannisters directly. But Ned, I'm afraid. Robb is so young, so eager to prove himself. He talks about rescuing his father and his sister like it's a song, like he's the hero of some story. He doesn't understand what war really is. Please heal quickly. Please come to us. Our son needs his father. Our family needs you. All my love, Cat. Ned folded the letter carefully and tucked it into his pocket. Catelyn was right to be afraid. Robb was charging into war with the confidence of youth and the ignorance of inexperience. He would learn quickly. War was a harsh teacher, but the first lessons might kill him, and there was still no plan for Sansa. No way to extract her from the Red Keep without triggering an immediate Lannister response. Bad news? Barristan asked. Complicated news. Ned showed him both letters. Stannis is moving fast. He's declaring the truth about Joffrey to the entire realm. That's good. The more people who hear it, the harder it is for the Lannisters to suppress. But it also forces their hand. They can't ignore an accusation this serious. They'll have to respond. With words, with force, with everything they have. Ned rubbed his face, and Sansa is right in the middle of it. If Stannis' claim gains traction, if lords start declaring for him, Cersei might decide Sansa is too dangerous to keep alive. Then we need to get her out. Soon. How? The Red Keep is the most defensible castle in Westeros. Cersei controls the Gold Cloaks. We have no agents in the city, no allies in the court. Even if we send a rescue mission, they'd be caught and killed before they reached her. What about negotiation? An exchange? We have nothing Cersei wants. Don't we? You're Eddard Stark of Winterfell, the man whose testimony could legitimize Stannis' claim or undermine it. If you publicly declared that you weren't certain about the incest, that you might have been mistaken, I won't lie about that. The truth is the truth. I'm not saying you should lie. I'm saying Cersei doesn't know you won't. Barristan leaned forward. What if we sent an envoy, someone who could hint that you might be willing to reconsider your testimony in exchange for Sansa's safe return? Cersei would never believe it. Maybe not. But she might be willing to negotiate anyway, especially if the war starts going badly for the Lannisters. A hostage is only valuable if the other side cares about keeping them alive. If you show you're willing to bargain, it keeps Sansa valuable, keeps her safe. Ned considered it. Who would we send? Who does Cersei trust enough to believe? Someone neutral. Someone with no ties to either House Stark or House Lannister. Barristan paused. Someone like me. You killed Gregor Clegane. Cersei would have you executed the moment you entered King's Landing. Not if I came under a flag of truce. Not if I came as a formal envoy seeking negotiation. Even Cersei respects the ancient laws about envoys. Killing them brings the wrath of every house in Westeros. Barristan's voice was calm. And I'm not just any envoy. I'm Barristan Selmy. I served 3 kings. I have reputation. Wait, if I tell Cersei you're willing to talk, she might believe it long enough to keep Sansa alive while we figure out a better plan. It's too dangerous. Everything is dangerous now, but this might buy us time, and time is what we need. Barristan met Ned's eyes. Let me do this, Ned. Let me try to save your daughter. Wanted to find another way. But Barristan was right. They needed time. And if there was even a chance this could keep Sansa safe while they prepared for war, it was worth trying. All right, Ned said. But you take guards. Manderly men. Enough to ensure safe passage. Agreed. And you make it clear. This is exploration. Preliminary negotiation. I'm not committed to anything. I just want my daughter back. I'll make that very clear. Barristan stood. I'll leave tomorrow. With luck, I'll be back in 2 weeks with Sansa. Or at least with information about what Cersei wants. And if she refuses to negotiate, then we'll know where we stand, and we'll plan accordingly. Barristan moved toward the door, then paused. Ned, if I don't come back, if something goes wrong in King's Landing, don't let it stop you. Keep fighting. Win this war. Seat Stannis on the throne. Make sure it all meant something. Nothing's going to go wrong. But I've been a soldier for 40 years. I know how to prepare for bad outcomes. Barristan smiled. Just promise me you'll finish this, one way or another. I promise. Barristan left. Ned sat alone in his chamber and stared at the letters from Stannis and Catelyn. The realm was fracturing. The Northern and Riverlands armies were marching. Stannis was declaring the truth about Joffrey to every lord from Dorne to the Wall. War was coming. The War of the Five Kings, historians would later call it, though in this timeline perhaps it would be the War of the Two Kings. Stannis versus Joffrey, legitimacy versus power, truth versus lies. And somewhere in the middle of it all, a 12-year-old girl with auburn hair and her father's sense of honor was trapped in a castle surrounded by people who wanted her dead. Ned picked up his cane and stood. His leg protested, but he pushed through the pain and walked to the window. Outside, he could see White Harbor stretching toward the horizon. Ships in the harbor, people in the streets. A city going about its business, unaware that the world was about to burn. But it would burn. Ned knew that now with absolute certainty. The question was whether anything, or anyone, would be left standing when the flames finally died. Barristan Selmy rode south from White Harbor with 20 Manderly guards in their green and white livery. Ned watched them depart from the castle walls, his hands gripping the stone parapet, his broken leg throbbing despite the support of his cane. The old knight sat tall in his saddle despite the lingering pain in his ribs, looking every inch the legendary warrior he was. He'll be fine, Wyman Manderly said beside Ned. Sir Barristan has survived worse than negotiating with Cersei Lannister. Has he? Ned's voice was grim. The woman is a viper. She'll smile while planning his murder. Then she'll be disappointed. My men have orders to watch him every moment, and to fight their way out if the Lannisters try anything. Wyman paused. Sir Barristan knows the risks. He's choosing to take them anyway. I know. Ned watched until the column disappeared from view. That's what worries me. Maester Theomore brought it to Ned's chambers, his expression troubled. From your son, my lord, the news is complicated. Ned unrolled the message. Father, Walder Frey is demanding payment for crossing his bridge, marriage alliances, coin, hostages. I've negotiated passage. I'll marry one of his daughters once the war is over, and Arya will marry one of his sons when she's old enough. The northern host is 20,000 strong, well-armed, well-provisioned. We crossed the Green Fork 2 days ago and caught the Lannister army unaware. Jaime Lannister had 15,000 men besieging River Run. We attacked his camps at night, the Whispering Wood they're calling it. We took Jaime prisoner, killed nearly 4,000 Lannister soldiers. The rest scattered. River Run is relieved. Grandfather's forces broke the siege from inside, while we attacked from without. The Riverlands are secure. But father, there's something else. When I captured Jaime, he tried to negotiate. He offered to trade himself for Sansa, said Cersei would agree to an exchange. I didn't accept, didn't trust him. But the offer stands. What should I do? We have their best general, their best sword. But you know Cersei better than I do. Would she honor such a trade? I'm holding Jaime at River Run under heavy guard, awaiting your orders. Ned read the letter 3 times, his mind racing. Robb had won. His son, 17 years old and never before in battle, had caught Jaime Lannister, the finest warrior in Westeros, and taken him prisoner. The Whispering Wood would go down in history as one of the great tactical victories of the war. But the offer of an exchange changed everything. Jaime for Sansa, the Kingslayer for Ned's daughter. "My lord?" the Timur asked. "Is the news good or bad?" But now he faces a choice that could define the entire war. He needed to think, needed to consider all angles before responding to Robb. Would Cersei honor the trade? Logic said no. The Queen had shown herself willing to break any promise, violate any oath, to protect her interests. Trading Jaime for Sansa meant giving up her twin brother, the man she loved, the father of her children, in exchange for a hostage whose only value was leverage over Ned. But circumstances were different now. The Lannisters had just lost their best general and 4,000 men. Tywin Lannister was still in the field somewhere, probably marching toward the Riverlands with whatever forces he could muster. Without Jaime, the Lannister military was significantly weakened, and Cersei loved her brother. That love was twisted, incestuous, criminal, but it was real. She might be willing to trade for him, especially if the alternative was watching him rot in a northern dungeon for years. The question was whether Ned could trust her to keep her word. He couldn't, but that didn't mean the trade couldn't happen. It just meant it needed to be structured carefully, with guarantees, with witnesses, with consequences for betrayal so severe that even Cersei would think twice. Ned sent for parchment and ink and began composing his response to Robb. 3 days later, another raven arrived, this one from Stannis. "Lord Stark, my declaration has reached the major houses. The responses are mixed. Dorne has declared for me. Prince Doran remembers what the Lannisters did to his sister and her children. He's sending 10,000 spears north to join our cause. The Vale remains neutral. Lysa Arryn refuses to commit the Knights of the Vale to either side. She claims she's protecting her son and will not risk him in southern wars. The Reach is the critical piece. Mace Tyrell has the largest army in Westeros, 50,000 men if he calls every banner. But he's traditionally aligned with the Lannisters through trade and politics. I'm attempting to negotiate an alliance, but he's being coy, waiting to see which side appears stronger. The Stormlands are mine by right. It was my seat before Robert gave it to Renly. Most of the houses have declared for me, though some are still sitting on their hands. Which brings me to my brother. Renly has declared himself king. He claims Robert's throne by right of conquest, the same right Robert used against the Targaryens. He has the support of House Tyrell, who apparently value his charm more than legitimacy. Marjorie Tyrell is to be his queen. With the Reach's 50,000 men and the Stormlands houses he's peeled away from me, he commands the largest army in Westeros. This complicates our plans significantly. Renly is not the monster Joffrey is. He's not cruel or mad, but he's a usurper, same as Joffrey. The throne passes to me by law, and I will not cede my rights to a younger brother who has no legal claim. We may be fighting a 3-way war, my forces and yours against the Lannisters in the center, while Renly's massive army approaches from the south. Your counsel would be appreciated. You know both of my brothers. How do we handle this?" Stannis Ned set the letter down and rubbed his eyes. The war was multiplying. What had begun as Stark versus Lannister was now becoming far more complex. Stannis versus Joffrey versus Renly, legitimacy versus power versus charm. And somewhere in the middle, Ned was trying to rescue his daughter and keep his family alive. Renly claiming the throne was almost understandable. The boy, for he was still just 21, had always been more interested in appearances than laws. He was handsome, charismatic, beloved by the small folk. With the Reach's support, he actually had a credible path to the throne. But he had no legal right. The succession was clear. Robert's children were bastards, which meant the throne passed to Robert's brothers in order of age, Stannis first, then Renly if Stannis died. Renly jumping the line was exactly the kind of ambition over law thinking that had led to the current crisis. And now Ned had to figure out how to keep the anti-Lannister coalition from tearing itself apart, fighting over who got to sit the Iron Throne after they won. Arya appeared in the doorway, her practice sword still in hand. "Father, Lord Wyman says you wanted to see me?" "Yes." Ned gestured for her to sit. "We need to talk about something Robb wrote in his letter." Arya's face went wary. What did he do? He negotiated safe passage across the twins. With Walder Frey, Ned kept his voice gentle. Part of that negotiation was a marriage pact. He's marrying a Frey girl. Ugh. They're all, not just him. You're betrothed to one of Walder Frey's sons. The marriage would happen when you're old enough. Arya went very still. No, I'm not marrying anyone, especially not some Frey. Her voice rose. You can't make me. I'm not making you do anything. Robb made this agreement without my knowledge or consent. I'm telling you about it because you deserve to know. Ned paused. But Arya, we needed to cross that bridge. The Twins is the only crossing point for an army that large. Walder Frey had us trapped. Robb did what he had to do. Then he should have married the Frey girl himself and left me out of it. He also promised you to one of Walder's sons. It was the price of passage. Arya stood abruptly. I won't do it. When I'm old enough, I'll run away before I marry some stupid Frey boy who probably picks his nose and smells like cheese. Despite everything, Ned almost smiled. You might be surprised. Not all of them are terrible. I don't care. I'm not marrying anyone. Arya's gray eyes were fierce. I'm going to be a warrior. Like Sir Barristan. Like you. I'm not going to sit in some castle having babies. Arya. No. She turned and ran from the room. Ned didn't call her back. She needed time to process this, and truthfully, he wasn't sure he would hold her to the betrothal, even if Robb had made it. Arya was right. Forcing her into a marriage she didn't want would destroy something essential in her. But that was a problem for later. First, they had to win the war. Then they could figure out how to handle the aftermath. 2 weeks passed with agonizing slowness. Ned's leg continued to heal. He could walk short distances now without the cane, though anything more ambitious left him limping badly. Maester Themor was pleased with the progress and predicted he'd be fit to ride within another month. A month felt like an eternity when Barristan was still in King's Landing negotiating with Cersei. The ravens continued to arrive with news from across the realm. From Robb at Riverrun. We're holding position, fortifying, waiting for your orders. Jaime Lannister is well guarded and alive. Mother sends her love. Grandfather Hoster is ill. Something in his belly that the maesters can't cure. He's still able to lead, but he's weakening. From Stannis at Dragonstone. Renly refuses all negotiation. He claims his army gives him the right to rule. He's marching north from Highgarden with 100,000 men. We need to move soon before he arrives. From Tyrion Lannister, which surprised Ned, sent to White Harbor under a flag of truce. Lord Stark. You don't know me, though you briefly met my brother Jaime before he tried to kill you in the street. I am Tyrion, the dwarf, the family embarrassment, and currently the man Cersei has sent to negotiate your daughter's return. Yes, you read that correctly. Despite my sister's many flaws, she does occasionally recognize when she needs someone clever rather than someone cruel. I'm here to discuss terms. The offer, Jaime for Sansa. A straight exchange, your daughter for my brother. The terms, the exchange happens at neutral ground. I suggest the crossroads inn where the King's Road meets the River Road. Both parties bring equal forces. Both hostages are inspected and verified. Then we trade and depart. Guarantees. I will personally escort Sansa to the exchange point and guarantee her safety. You may send whoever you trust to verify Jaime's condition and handle the transfer. My sister may be many things, but she loves her brother, truly loves him in ways that violate several important laws. She will honor this trade because the alternative is losing Jaime forever, but we need to move quickly. Tywin is gathering forces in the Westerlands. Once he marches east with a full army, all negotiations end. The exchange must happen in the next fortnight. Your response requested urgently. Tyrion Lannister, Ned read the letter multiple times, analyzing every word for deception. Tyrion was clever. That much was clear from the tone and structure of the message. He acknowledged Cersei's flaws while vouching for her love of Jaime. He proposed neutral ground and equal forces. He set a deadline that served both parties' interests. It sounded legitimate, which made Ned deeply suspicious. But what choice did he have? Sansa was still a hostage. Every day she spent in Cersei's power was another day she could be hurt, used, or killed. If there was any chance this trade was genuine, Ned had to take it. He composed his response carefully. Tyrion Lannister, I accept your proposal. The exchange will happen at the Crossroads Inn in 10 days' time. I will send a representative with Jaime Lannister, accompanied by 100 northern soldiers. You will bring Sansa with equal forces. Before the exchange, my representative will be allowed to speak with Sansa privately to to verify she is unharmed and willing to return home. Your representative may do the same with Jaime. If either party violates these terms, the deal is void, and the hostages return to their respective captors. One additional term, Barristan Selmy is currently in King's Landing as my envoy. He must be allowed to depart safely before the exchange occurs. If any harm comes to him, the trade will not proceed. Ned Stark, Lord of Winterfell, Warden of the North, he sent the raven and waited. The response came 3 days later. Lord Stark, your terms are acceptable. Sir Barristan will be allowed to depart King's Landing unharmed. In fact, he's already left. He should reach White Harbor shortly after this raven does. My sister was not happy about his presence. Apparently, he spent 2 days lecturing her on honor, duty, and the proper treatment of hostages. She nearly had him arrested 6 times. That he's still alive is testament to his reputation and my eloquent arguments on his behalf. The exchange will proceed as planned. 10 days, Crossroads Inn, equal forces. I look forward to meeting your representative. I've heard Northerners are grim and humorless, but I remain optimistic. Tyrion. Ned felt tension he hadn't realized he was carrying drain from his shoulders. Barristan was safe. The trade was confirmed. Now he just had to decide who to send. Barristan arrived at White Harbor 6 days later, riding hard with his Manderley escort. Ned was in the practice yard, attempting to walk without limping, an exercise in frustration. When the old knight was announced, he crossed the yard as quickly as his healing leg would allow. Barristan dismounted stiffly. He looked exhausted, his face lined with strain, but he was whole and apparently unharmed. Ned, Barristan gripped his arm. Thank the gods you're up and moving. What happened in King's Landing? Tyrion said Cersei merely had you arrested 6 times. She was very specific about the number. Barristan smiled faintly. But I had a flag of truce and the backing of every ancient law about envoys. She couldn't touch me without alienating every house in Westeros. So instead, she lectured me about loyalty and honor, and how dare I betray my oaths by fighting for you. And you said that my oaths were to the realm, not to bastard kings born of incest? That made her quiet for a while. Barristan's expression turned serious. But Ned, I saw Sansa. Cersei allowed me to speak with her briefly, under guard. Ned's heart clenched. How is she? Frightened, but unharmed physically. Cersei has kept her locked in her chambers with a septa and guards. She's been made to write letters to you. Letters saying she's being treated well, asking you to surrender. She refused to cooperate, so they stopped making her write. Did you tell her about the exchange? I did. She didn't believe it at first, thought it was another trick, but I convinced her it was real, that in 10 days she'd be free. Barristan paused. She cried. Asked me to tell you she's sorry for everything, for believing Joffrey's lies, for thinking she wanted to stay in the South. She has nothing to apologize for. Ned's voice was rough. She's a child who was lied to by experts. I told her that. She didn't quite believe me, but she understood. Barristan looked at Ned. The exchange is legitimate. Tyrion is many things, but he's honest within the bounds of his own self-interest. He wants his brother back. Cersei wants Jaime back. They'll honor the trade. Once they have Jaime, what stops them from coming after us again? Nothing. But they'll be delayed. Tyrion admitted as much. Tywin is gathering forces in the Westerlands. But it takes time. The exchange buys you weeks, maybe a month. Time to position your forces. Time to coordinate with Stannis. Time to prepare for the real war. Ned nodded slowly. I'm sending you to handle the exchange. Barristan blinked. Me? You've met Tyrion. You know Cersei's methods. You're the one person I trust completely to get Sansa back safely. Ned gripped the old knight's shoulder. I'd go myself, but I still can't ride for long distances. My leg, and I'll do it. Barristan's voice was firm. I'll bring your daughter home, Ned. I swear it. The next 6 days were a flurry of preparation. Barristan would ride to River Run first to collect Jaime Lannister from Robb's custody. Then he'd proceed to the Crossroads Inn with 100 northern soldiers, led by Robb himself. The boy wanted to see his sister freed, and Ned couldn't deny him that. Catelyn would join them. She'd sent a raven insisting on being present when Sansa was returned. Ned understood. His wife needed to see their daughter, needed to hold her and know she was safe. Ned himself would remain at White Harbor, still healing, coordinating the larger war effort with Stannis. The night before Barristan's departure, They sat together in Ned's chambers, drinking ale and speaking of what came next. Renly is the problem, Ned said. Not just the Lannisters. Stannis and Renly will tear each other apart fighting over succession, and the Lannisters will exploit that division. Can you negotiate between them? Barristan asked. I can try, but Renly won't listen. He thinks his army gives him the right to rule, and Stannis is rigid about law. He won't compromise his claim. Ned rubbed his face. We're walking into a war with 3 kings all claiming the same throne. 4, if you count Balon Greyjoy. I've heard rumors he's preparing to declare independence and raid the north while you're distracted. One crisis at a time. Ned took a long drink. The Ironborn can wait. First, we get Sansa back. Then we deal with the Lannisters. Then we figure out how to unite the realm behind Stannis without fighting Renly. Ambitious plan. But it's all we have. Ned looked at Barristan. After the exchange, after Sansa is safe, what will you do? What do you mean? I mean you're Barristan Selmy. You could serve any king in Westeros. Stannis would take you in a heartbeat. Renly would welcome you with open arms. Even some of the free cities would pay fortunes for your sword. Ned paused. You don't have to stay tied to the Starks. You've already done more than anyone could ask. Barristan was quiet for a moment. Do you want me to leave? No. But I want you to have the choice. You've spent 40 years in service to kings. You deserve to choose your own path. I am choosing. Barristan met his eyes. I'm choosing to serve the rightful king, Stannis Baratheon. And I'm choosing to fight beside the most honorable man I've met in all my years of service. That's you, Ned. If you'll have me, I'll stand with House Stark until this war is done. Then I'll have you, gladly. Ned raised his cup. To the rightful king. And to getting my daughter back. To Sansa, Barristan agreed. And to survival. The exchange happened exactly as planned. Barristan sent a raven from the Crossroads Inn on the appointed day. Ned, Sansa is safe. The trade occurred without incident. Tyrion brought her with 50 Lannister soldiers. We brought Jaime with 100 Northmen. Both hostages were inspected. Both were verified unharmed. The exchange was made. Jaime returned to the Lannisters. Sansa came home to us. She's thin and pale but whole. Catelyn is with her now. Robb is standing guard like he expects Lannisters to appear from the trees. We're returning to Riverrun immediately. Your daughter is free. Barristan, Ned read the message 3 times. Relief flooding through him so powerfully, it made his hands shake. Sansa was safe. His daughter was free. After weeks of captivity, of fear, of being used as leverage, she was finally coming home. He wanted to ride to Riverrun immediately. Wanted to see her with his own eyes, hold her, tell her everything would be all right. But his leg still wasn't strong enough for that journey. He could walk now without limping badly. Could even manage short rides. But the distance to Riverrun was too far. He would have to wait. Wait for Sansa to come north to him, or wait until he was healed enough to travel south. The waiting was agony. Another raven arrived 2 days later, this one from Robb. Father, she doesn't talk much yet. Mother says she needs time, but she's eating, sleeping, and she seems stronger every day. The Lannisters kept their word. Tyrion personally escorted her to the exchange and made sure she was unharmed. I don't trust him. He's a Lannister. But he honored the agreement. Now we need to decide what happens next. The Northern Army is at Riverrun. Grandfather's Riverlands forces are with us. Together we have 35,000 men, well-fed, well-armed, ready to fight. Stannis has sent word. He wants to coordinate our campaigns. His plan: he'll attack King's Landing from Dragonstone with his fleet and 15,000 men. We'll march south through the Riverlands and pin any Lannister forces that try to relieve the capital. Together, we crush them. But there's a complication. Renly's army is moving north from the Reach, 100,000 men. He's demanding we bend the knee to him instead of Stannis. What do we do? Fight the Lannisters and Renly simultaneously? Try to negotiate? I need your guidance. Robb, Ned stared at the letter. The pieces were moving faster than he could track. Stannis preparing to attack King's Landing. Renly marching north with overwhelming force. The Stark Tully army caught between 2 Baratheon brothers fighting over succession. This was the nightmare scenario. The anti-Lannister coalition fracturing before they'd even finished the war. He needed to act, needed to bring the sides together before everything collapsed, needed to be there, not stuck in White Harbor waiting for his leg to heal. Maester Theamore, Ned called. The maester appeared. My lord? How much longer before I can ride? Really ride, not just short distances in the yard. Another 2 weeks, perhaps 3. The bone needs more time to strengthen fully. I don't have 3 weeks. I need to get to River Run now. My lord, if you push too hard, you risk re-breaking the leg, or causing permanent damage that would leave you crippled. And if I don't go, I risk losing the war before it's properly begun. Ned stood, testing his weight on the healing leg. It hurt, but it held. I'm going. Prepare travel arrangements. A wagon if necessary, but I'm leaving tomorrow. Lord Stark. Tomorrow, Maester. That's final. The journey to River Run took 12 days. Ned traveled in a wagon for the worst stretches, riding horseback when the roads were good. His leg protested constantly, but he gritted his teeth and pushed through. Lord Wyman had sent an escort of 200 Manderley soldiers and his own son Wylis to ensure safe passage. They reached River Run on a gray afternoon with rain threatening. The castle sat at the joining of the Tumblestone and Red Fork rivers, its red stone walls rising from the earth itself. The Stark and Tully banners flew from the towers, the great dire wolf and the leaping trout. Side by side, Robb met Ned at the gates. His son had changed. The boy who had left Winterfell weeks ago was gone. In his place stood a young man with a commander's bearing, wearing armor that had seen recent battle, his face harder than Ned remembered. Father. Robb embraced him carefully, mindful of Ned's leg. Thank the gods you're here. Where's your sister? Robb paused. She's better than when we first got her back. But she's still quiet, still withdrawn. Mother says she just needs time. Take me to her. Robb led Ned through the castle to the Tully family chambers. Catelyn met them at the door, and the sight of his wife after so many weeks apart made Ned's chest tight. She looked older, more careworn, but her eyes lit up when she saw him. Ned. She pulled him into an embrace. Your leg. Are you all right? Should you be traveling? Where's Sansa? Catelyn led him to an inner chamber. Sansa sat by the window, looking out at the rain-dark river. She was thin, too thin, and her auburn hair had been cut shorter than Ned remembered. But she was alive, whole, home. Sansa, he said softly. She turned. For a moment she just stared at him, as if not quite believing he was real. Then she stood and ran across the room and threw her arms around him. Father, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Hush. Ned held her tight, feeling her shake with sobs. You have nothing to apologize for. Nothing. You're safe now, that's all that matters. About our family, they made me write letters saying you were a traitor. I didn't want to, but I know. It's all right. None of that matters now. They stood together while Sansa cried against his chest, and Catelyn watched from the doorway with tears running down her face. Finally, Sansa pulled back. Are we going home? To Winterfell? Soon. But first, we have work to do. A war to finish. Ned touched her face gently. Can you be strong a little longer? I can try. That's all I ask. That evening, Ned met with his war council in River Run's Great Hall. Present were Robb, Catelyn, Barristan, Brynden Blackfish, Tully, Catelyn's uncle and River Run's castellan, and Mage Mormont, representing the northern houses. Lord Hoster Tully was too ill to attend, confined to his chambers under Maester's care. Ned sat at the head of the table, his leg propped on a stool beneath, and listened to the situation reports. Tywin Lannister is at Harrenhal with 20,000 men, the Blackfish said. He's fortifying, waiting for us to make a move. Stannis is at Dragonstone with 15,000 and the royal fleet, Barristan added. He's ready to attack King's Landing by sea whenever we give the word. Renly is at Bitterbridge with 100,000, Robb said. He sent a raven demanding we bend the knee to him. When I refused, he said he'd march north and crush us along with the Lannisters. Cheerful, Ned said dryly. Anything else? Balon Greyjoy has declared himself king of the Iron Islands and the North, Mage Mormont said. He's launched raids along the coast. Nothing major yet, but he's testing our defenses. So we have Tywin at Harrenhal, Stannis at Dragonstone, Renly at Bitterbridge, and Balon raiding the coast. Anything else want to go wrong? The Maesters say we have perhaps 6 months before the first major snows. If this war isn't finished by then, campaigning becomes nearly impossible. Ned absorbed this. Then we need to move fast. Finish the Lannisters before winter. Before Renly can interfere. Before, he stopped. An idea was forming. Dangerous, probably insane, but potentially war-ending. What if we don't fight Renly at all? Ned said slowly. Everyone stared at him. Explain, Barristan said. Renly's claim is based on power, not law. He has the biggest army, so he thinks he deserves the throne. But what if we remove that advantage? How? Robb asked. We focus everything on the Lannisters. Ignore Renly completely. Stannis attacks King's Landing from the sea. We pin Tywin at Harrenhal or draw him into battle. We crush the Lannisters fast and decisively, before Renly can march north to interfere. And then? Catelyn asked. Then the Lannisters are gone. Stannis sits the Iron Throne by right of succession. And Renly has a choice. Acknowledge his brother as the rightful king, or launch a civil war against the man who just saved the realm from the Lannisters. With his strongest political argument, that he's the only one who can defeat them, completely undermined. The table was quiet as they considered this. It's risky, the Blackfish said. If we move against Tywin and he's stronger than we think, we could lose. And then Renly sweeps in and takes everything. But if we win, Barristan said, the war is effectively over. Renly won't fight Stannis for the throne if Stannis has already claimed it and proven himself a capable king. He's never been in battle. He's surrounded by summer knights who think war is tournaments and glory. When they see what real war looks like, when they watch the Lannisters fall and realize they'd be fighting the combined forces of the North, Riverlands, Stannis' army, and Dorne, they might convince Renly to negotiate rather than fight. You're gambling that Renly is more reasonable than he appears, Catelyn said. I'm gambling that the people around him are. Mace Tyrell, Randil Tarly, the other Reach Lords. They're not fools. They won't throw their armies away in a fratricidal war if they don't have to. Robb leaned forward. So the plan is, march on Harrenhal, engage Tywin, destroy his army. Simultaneously, Stannis attacks King's Landing. The Lannisters fall. Stannis takes the throne. We present Renly with accomplished facts and dare him to start a war over it. Yes, I like it, Robb said. It's bold. It's insane, the Blackfish said. But I've seen worse plans work, and sitting here waiting for Renly to arrive with 100,000 men isn't a better option. Barristan? Ned asked. You know Stannis. Will he agree to this? Stannis wants justice and legitimacy. If we can deliver both by crushing the Lannisters quickly, he'll agree. The man is nothing if not decisive once a plan is set. Barristan paused. But we need to move immediately, before winter makes campaigning impossible. We have perhaps 6 weeks to execute this. Send ravens to Stannis. Tell him to prepare for an immediate assault on King's Landing. We'll march on Harrenhal and force Tywin into battle. Coordinate the timing so both attacks happen simultaneously. What about me? Robb asked. You'll command the vanguard. 20,000 men, northern and riverlands mixed. I'll command the main force, another 15,000. We'll catch Tywin between us. Your leg is healed enough to ride into battle. It has to be. Ned looked at his son. Robb, you've won every engagement so far. The Whispering Wood. The camps, you're a natural commander. But this will be different. This will be a pitched battle against the most dangerous general in Westeros. You need to be smart, patient. Don't let Tywin bait you into mistakes. I won't. Robb's voice was firm. I'll make you proud, father. You already have. The Battle of Harrenhal began on a cold morning with frost on the ground. Ned watched from horseback as 35,000 men formed up on the field south of the ruined castle. The northern forces on the left, Riverlands on the right, cavalry in reserve. Across the field, Tywin Lannister's 20,000 crimson and gold banners rippling in the wind. Ned's leg throbbed, but he ignored it. He'd taken milk of the poppy that morning to dull the pain, enough to function, not enough to cloud his judgment. Barristan rode beside him, once again in armor, looking every inch the legendary knight. Tywin won't retreat. He'll stand and fight. I know. He can't afford to look weak, not with his children's legitimacy under question. Not with Stannis attacking King's Landing. Ned drew his sword, not ice, which had been lost when the Lannisters arrested him, but a good castle-forged blade Robb had given him. This ends today. The battle unfolded in 3 phases. First, the northern cavalry under Robb swept the Lannister left flank, punching through their lines and threatening their baggage train. Tywin responded by pivoting his reserve to meet the threat. Exactly what Ned wanted. Second, the Riverlands infantry under the Blackfish pushed forward in the center, engaging the Lannister main force. The fighting was brutal. Shield walls crashing together, men dying by the hundreds. But the Riverlands held. Third, Ned committed his reserve, 5,000 fresh northern troops who had been waiting in the tree line. They struck the Lannister right, just as Tywin was repositioning to counter Robb's cavalry attack. The Lannister line buckled, then broke. What followed was a rout. Tywin's men scattered, running for Harrenhal or the God's Eye Lake, or anywhere that wasn't the killing field. The Northern and Riverlands soldiers pursued, cutting down stragglers, taking prisoners. Tywin himself escaped with perhaps 3,000 men, retreating west toward the Westerlands. But his army was destroyed, his reputation shattered, his ability to continue the war crippled. Ned rode through the aftermath, his legs screaming with pain, but his heart soaring. They had won. Against the most feared general in Westeros, they had won. The casualties were heavy, perhaps 8,000 dead or wounded on their side. But the Lannisters had lost 15,000. The math was in the North's favor. That night, a raven arrived from Stannis. Lord Stark, King's Landing has fallen. My fleet broke through the Blackwater defenses. The city garrison surrendered after Joffrey fled the Red Keep with Cersei. I sit the Iron Throne. The Lannisters are broken. The war is effectively over. But Renly approaches with his host. We must negotiate before more blood is shed. Stannis Baratheon, first of his name, King of the Andals and the First Men, Lord of the Seven Kingdoms and Protector of the Realm. Ned read the message to his assembled commanders. We did it, Robb said, disbelief in his voice. We actually did it. The war's not over, Ned cautioned. But the Lannisters are finished. Now we just need to convince Renly not to start a new war. The massive army sprawled across the fields like a city of tents, 100,000 men, all bannered in the colors of the Reach and Stormlands. At the center, in a pavilion flying the crowned stag of Baratheon, sat Renly. Ned dismounted with difficulty, his leg protesting. Barristan helped him walk to the pavilion. Renly looked exactly as Ned remembered, handsome, young, supremely confident. Beside him sat Margaery Tyrell, beautiful and calculating. Lord Stark, Renly said. I heard you were dead. Rumors of your demise, apparently exaggerated. I could say the same about your claim to the throne, Ned replied. Your brother Stannis sits the Iron Throne. The Lannisters are defeated. The war is over. The war is not over until I say it's over. Renly's smile was sharp. Stannis may have taken King's Landing, but I have the largest army in Westeros. The throne belongs to whoever is strong enough to hold it. That's Robert's logic. The same logic that started this whole mess. Ned kept his voice level. The succession is clear, Renly. Joffrey was a bastard. The throne passes to Stannis as Robert's eldest brother. That's law. That's legitimacy. If you fight him for it, you're no better than the Lannisters. Stannis is hated. Rigid. He burned statues of the Seven and worships a foreign god. The realm will never love him. The realm doesn't need to love him. It needs a legitimate king who will enforce the law. Ned paused. Renly, I knew your brother Robert. I fought beside him. He won the throne by conquest, and it ate at him for the rest of his life. He was never truly happy, never at peace, because deep down he knew he'd taken something that wasn't his by right. Robert was a great king. Robert was a drunk who let the Lannisters destroy his kingdom from within. Is that what you want to be? Another usurper who spends his reign looking over his shoulder? Renly's smile faded. What do you want, Lord Stark? Acknowledge Stannis as king. In return, he confirms you as Lord of Storm's End and gives you a place on the small council. You keep your lands, your titles, your honor, no more bloodshed. And if I refuse, then you fight the North, the Riverlands, Stannis' forces, and Dorne. All winter is coming and the realm is exhausted from war. Ned met his eyes. You might win. Your army is huge. But the cost would be catastrophic. And for what? A throne you have no legal right to claim? Renly was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he looked at Margaery. She leaned close and whispered something Ned couldn't hear. I need to consult with my advisors, Renly said. Give me 3 days. Then I'll have an answer. Renly bent the knee. Not immediately. Not gracefully. But after 3 days of negotiations with his Reach lords, After Randyll Tarly and Mace Tyrell made it clear they wouldn't support a fratricidal war, Renly agreed to acknowledge Stannis as king. In return, Stannis confirmed Renly as Lord of Storm's End, named him Master of Laws, and agreed to marry Shireen, Stannis' daughter, to one of Mace Tyrell's sons to seal the alliance with the Reach. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't even particularly satisfying. But it was peace. The War of the Five Kings ended not with a grand battle, but with negotiation. Stannis on the throne, the Lannisters broken and scattered, the realm unified under legitimate rule. Ned returned to Riverrun exhausted but victorious. Sansa met him at the gates. She looked healthier now, some color back in her cheeks, some light back in her eyes. "Father," she said, "is it over?" "It's over," Ned confirmed. "We're going home." "To Winterfell?" "To Winterfell. All of us together, as family." He pulled her close. "The way it should be." Epilogue. 6 months later, Ned stood on Winterfell's walls watching winter snow fall across the north. The war was truly over now. Tywin Lannister had fled to Casterly Rock and died there 3 months later. Some said of shame, others of poison administered by Tyrion. Cersei had escaped to Essos with Joffrey and Myrcella. Tommen had been sent to the Faith, his name changed, his royal blood erased. Stannis ruled from King's Landing. Harshly, justly, exactly as everyone expected. The realm grumbled but obeyed. Renly served as Master of Laws and slowly won over the court with his charm. Stannis hated it, but recognized its political value. Sansa was home. Arya was home. Bran and Rickon had never left. The family was whole. But the letter in Ned's hand reminded him that some wars never truly ended. It was from Jon Snow at Castle Black, his handwriting cramped and urgent. "Father, the dead are coming. I know how that sounds, but it's true. The wildlings are fleeing south by the thousands. They're terrified of something beyond the wall, something they won't even name. We've lost 3 ranging parties in the last 2 months. The men who came back, they came back wrong, with blue eyes and cold hands. We had to burn the bodies. Lord Commander Mormont believes the White Walkers are real, that the long night is returning. We need help. We need men, weapons, supplies. The Watch has fewer than 300 brothers fit to fight. If the wall falls, the North falls with it. Then the rest of Westeros. I'm asking you to take this seriously. I'm asking you to send help before it's too late. Your son, Jon." Ned folded the letter carefully and looked north, toward the wall, toward the darkness gathering beyond it. He had survived trial by combat, had won a war, had reunited his family and seen justice done, had helped seat the rightful king on the Iron Throne. But none of that would matter if the dead came south and found the realm unprepared. The door to the wall walk opened. Barristan emerged, his white hair bright against the gray sky. "Trouble?" he asked, seeing Ned's expression. "A different kind of war." Ned handed him Jon's letter. "The kind that makes our southern politics look like children playing with wooden swords." Barristan read quickly. His face went pale. "White Walkers. The old legends. Not so old anymore, apparently." Ned looked at his friend. "I need to go to Castle Black. See this with my own eyes. Talk to Jon and Lord Commander Mormont. Understand what we're facing. Your leg is healed enough. It's been 6 months. I can ride." Ned paused. "Will you come with me? To the wall? To face ice demons and walking corpses?" Barristan smiled faintly. "I killed the mountain that rides in single combat and helped win a war at 61. Why not end my career fighting the apocalypse at 62? That's not an answer." "Yes, Ned. I'll come with you." "Someone needs to keep you alive." Barristan looked north. "Besides, if this is real, if the White Walkers are truly returning, then everything we just fought for means nothing unless we stop them. I need to tell Catelyn. She won't want me to go. She'll understand. Eventually." Barristan clapped him on the shoulder. "Family, duty, honor. You've already done family and duty. Now comes the hard part. The honor of defending the realm even when the realm doesn't know it needs defending." They stood together on the walls of Winterfell and watched the snow fall. Somewhere far to the south, Stannis Baratheon ruled from the Iron Throne, trying to heal a kingdom broken by years of Lannister corruption and war. Renly chimed the court and slowly rebuilt the realm's shattered institutions. The Reach and Dorne were at peace. The Riverlands were recovering. The Stormlands were loyal. The Game of Thrones had been played and won, not perfectly, not without cost. but one nonetheless. But beyond the wall, in the lands of always winter, something ancient and terrible was stirring. Something that didn't care about succession laws or political alliances, or who sat which throne. The long night was coming, and Eddard Stark, who had demanded trial by combat and lived when he should have died, who had won a war and saved his family, would face this new threat the same way he had faced everything else in his life. With honor, with courage, with the absolute certainty that some things were worth dying for. The dead were coming, but the living would be ready. Jon Snow stood on the wall and looked north into the darkness. The letter to his father had been sent weeks ago. No response yet. Perhaps Ned didn't believe him. Perhaps he thought Jon was seeing shadows where none existed. But Jon knew what he'd seen, knew what the wildlings were fleeing, knew that the stories old Nan had told were not just stories. Beside him, Ghost sat silently, his red eyes watchful. The direwolf had grown massive in the months since they'd come to the wall, white as snow, silent as death, more intelligent than any animal should be. "You feel it too, don't you?" Jon said quietly. "Something's coming." Ghost's ears pricked forward. A low rumble came from his throat. Not quite a growl, but a warning. Movement in the forest below. Jon tensed, his hand going to Longclaw, the Valyrian steel bastard sword Lord Commander Mormont had given him after Jon saved his life from a white. But it wasn't a threat emerging from the trees. It was a girl. She stumbled out of the forest half frozen, her clothing torn, her face scratched by branches. Behind her, 3 more figures, wildlings from the look of them, but running south rather than raiding. "Open the gate," Jon shouted down to the courtyard. "We have refugees." The girl collapsed at the base of the wall, just as the gate creaked open. Jon rushed down the stairs, Ghost at his heels. He reached her as she was trying to stand. Up close, he could see she was young, perhaps 15, with red hair and fierce green eyes. "What's your name?" Jon asked, helping her up. "Ygritte," she said through chattering teeth. "And you need to close that wall. Bar the gates. Get everyone inside." "Why? What's out there?" She looked at him with an expression that made his blood run cold. "The dead," she said simply. "The army of the dead. They're coming. And they're bringing winter with them." The sky had gone dark despite it being midday. The wind had shifted, carrying with it a cold that had nothing to do with temperature, a cold that seemed to seep into bones and souls. And in the distance, barely visible through the trees, something moved, something pale and terrible and endless. "Sound the alarm," Jon said quietly. "Get everyone to the wall, now." One long note, then another, then a third. 3 blasts. The signal that had not been heard in 8,000 years. The White Walkers were here. 2 weeks later, Ned Stark rode through Castle Black's gates with Barristan Selmy and 50 northern soldiers. He'd received Jon's second raven 3 days ago, the one describing the attack, the dead climbing the wall, the desperate defense that had barely held, the one asking for immediate reinforcement because another attack could come any day. Ned had ridden hard, pushing his healing leg to its limits, arriving in half the time a normal journey would take. Jon met him in the courtyard. His son, his nephew, though the secret still held, looked older than when Ned had last seen him. Harder. His dark hair was longer, his face leaner, and his gray eyes held the weight of someone who had seen death and survived it. "Father," Jon said. The words still felt strange coming from him. "Thank you for coming." "Show me," Ned said. "Show me what you're facing." From 700 feet up, the view stretched for miles. And there, at the edge of the forest, Ned saw them. The dead. Thousands of them. Tens of thousands. Standing absolutely still, waiting. Their eyes glowed pale blue in the darkness. Some were fresh corpses, wildlings who had died fleeing south. Others were ancient, their flesh rotted away to bone and leather. And at their center, mounted on dead horses, were the White Walkers themselves. Tall and terrible, wrapped in ice and darkness, their weapons gleaming with cold fire. "Gods," Barristan whispered beside Ned. "It's real. All of it." "How many?" Ned asked. "We estimate 100,000, Jon said. "Maybe more. They've been gathering for weeks. Every person who dies north of the wall joins their ranks. Every wildling who doesn't make it south becomes another soldier in their army." "Can the wall hold them?" "For now, the wall is more than just ice. There's magic in it. Old magic from the Age of Heroes. The dead can't pass through it." Jon paused. but they're looking for a way around. Or through. We've already fought off one climbing attack. If they find a weakness, then they come south and the realm dies, Ned finished. He looked at his son. What do you need? Everything. Men, weapons, food, dragon glass, obsidian. It's one of the few things that can kill them. There are deposits at Dragonstone. Stannis needs to send every piece he can find. Jon's voice was urgent. Father, this isn't a war we can win by being brave or clever. We need every advantage, every weapon, every warm body that can hold a spear. Then you'll have them. Ned gripped Jon's shoulder. I'll send ravens to every house in the north. I'll convince Stannis to take this seriously. I'll get you the men and weapons you need. There's something else. Jon hesitated. The wildlings. There are thousands of them south of the wall now, refugees. They're terrified, disorganized, but they can fight, and they know the enemy better than we do. You want to arm them? Let them through the wall permanently. I want to give them a choice. Fight with us, and they earn shelter south of the wall, or refuse and die when the dead come. Jon looked at the army of corpses in the distance. We need every sword we can get, Father, even wildling swords. The centuries of raiding and killing, the blood feuds that stretched back generations. But he also thought of the army waiting in the forest, the dead who didn't care about politics or history or ancient grudges. Do it, Ned said. Offer them the choice. Anyone who'll fight for the living gets to live among the living when this is over. Jon nodded. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. This is just the beginning. Ned looked north one more time. The real war hasn't even started. 3 months later, King's Landing Stannis Baratheon sat the Iron Throne and listened to Eddard Stark's report with his characteristic stone-faced intensity. 100,000 dead, Stannis said when Ned finished, commanded by ice demons, marching south to kill every living thing in Westeros. Yes, Your Grace. And you expect me to believe this. I expect you to send the dragon glass I've requested, and I expect you to start preparing the realm for the only war that truly matters. Ned's voice was firm. Because if the wall falls and you haven't prepared, every person in the Seven Kingdoms dies, including you. Stannis was quiet for a long moment. I've heard the legends, read the histories, the Long Night, the last hero, but that was 8,000 years ago, and now it's happening again. Ned leaned forward. Your Grace, we just fought a war over who had the right to sit that throne. Thousands died. The realm was torn apart. But none of it will matter if the dead come south and find us divided. What do you suggest? Send every available man to the wall. Strip the garrisons from the southern castles if you have to. Mine every deposit of dragon glass at Dragonstone, and ship it north. Recall Valyrian steel weapons from the noble houses, and send them to the Watch. Those blades can kill White Walkers. Ned paused, and convince the realm this is real. Because right now, most lords think I'm mad. They think this is a northern problem. They're wrong. If I strip the garrisons, I leave the south vulnerable to Lannister remnants, to Greyjoy raiders, to... None of that matters, Ned's voice rose. Don't you understand? If the wall falls, there is no south. There are no politics. There are no lords or kings or thrones. There's just death walking across Westeros, until nothing lives. The small council members, Renly, Tyrion Lannister, newly appointed Master of Coin after Littlefinger's execution for treason, Barristan Selmy, newly appointed Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, and others, watched the exchange. Finally, Tyrion spoke. I believe him. Everyone turned to stare at the dwarf. Lord Stark has no reason to lie, Tyrion continued. He won the war. His family is safe. The Lannisters are broken. What does he gain by inventing an apocalypse? He looked at Stannis. Your Grace? I've spent my life reading. History, legends, old texts. The accounts of the Long Night are consistent across cultures. The Westerosi records match the Essosi ones. The Citadel dismissed them as myths. But what if they were wrong? That's a significant what if, Stannis said. So is what if Ned Stark is right and we do nothing? Tyrion spread his hands. One scenario costs us some resources we can spare. The other costs us everything. The risk-reward analysis seems clear. Stannis looked at Ned. How much time do we have? Months, maybe. The wall is holding for now, but every day more wildlings die trying to flee south. Every death adds to the army of the dead. It's only a matter of time before they find a way through. Lord Stark, you'll coordinate the defense of the north. I'll send you 10,000 men from the Crown Lands and Stormlands. Not enough to strip our defenses, but enough to make a difference. I need more than that. Then convince the other kingdoms to send their own forces. You're Warden of the North. They'll listen to you." Stannis's voice was iron. "I'll send the dragon glass. I'll recall Valyrian steel weapons. I'll make it clear that anyone who refuses to contribute to the defense of the realm will be marked as a traitor. But Ned, you need to make them believe. Make them see what you've seen. Because right now, most of them think you're chasing shadows." "I'll make them believe," Ned said. "One way or another." 6 months later, the Wall, the army of the living, had grown to 60,000. Northmen, Riverlanders, Stormlanders, Reachmen, Dornish spears, even a contingent from the Vale, after Ned had personally ridden to the Eyrie and convinced Lysa Arryn that the dead didn't care about her neutrality. 40,000 stood at Castle Black and the surrounding castles. Along the Wall, Eastwatch, the Shadow Tower, and others hastily regarrisoned. 20,000 more served as reserves at Winterfell, ready to reinforce if the Wall was breached. Jon Snow commanded the Wall's defense. Ned had argued for a more experienced general, but Lord Commander Mormont had insisted. "The boy knows the enemy. He's fought them. He's earned the trust of the wildlings, and he has the respect of the men. He's the right choice." So Jon, at 17, found himself commanding the largest military force assembled in the north since the Age of Heroes. And the dead were coming. They attacked on a moonless night when the darkness was absolute. 100,000 corpses climbing the Wall, their fingers finding impossible holds in the ice, moving with inhuman coordination. The White Walkers stood below, directing their army with silent commands. The defense was desperate. Wildfire poured down from the Wall's top, turning the ice red with flames, arrows by the thousands, many tipped with dragon glass, boulders dropped from cranes, boiling oil, every weapon the living could devise. The dead climbed through it all. Jon fought on the Wall's top, Longclaw in his hands, Ghost at his side. Every swing of the Valyrian steel blade ended a white. Every thrust dropped another corpse from the Wall. Beside him, Barristan Selmy fought with the grace of a man 40 years younger, his blade singing through the darkness. Further down the Wall, Robb Stark led a company of Northmen, his own Valyrian steel sword, ice, recovered from the Lannisters after King's Landing fell, cutting through the dead with cold efficiency. And below, coordinating the reserves, Ned Stark watched the battle unfold and prayed they could hold. The fight lasted 5 hours. When dawn finally broke, the Wall still stood. The dead had been driven back, their losses catastrophic. 20,000 corpses destroyed by fire and dragonglass and Valyrian steel. But the living had lost too. 3,000 men dead or wounded, and the dead's army still numbered 80,000. Jon found Ned in the aftermath, both of them exhausted and bloodied. "We can't win this way," Jon said quietly. "Every battle, we lose people we can't replace. Every person we lose becomes one of them. The math doesn't work." "I know." Ned looked at the army of the dead, still visible in the distance. "We need a different strategy. Something that breaks their army completely instead of just holding them off." "Kill the White Walkers," Barristan said, joining them. "That's the key. I watched during the battle. When one of the walkers falls, the whites near it collapse. They're controlling them somehow, coordinating them. But how? They stay back from the fighting, protected by their army. We go to them," Jon said. "A strike force. Small, fast, armed with Valyrian steel and dragonglass. We punch through the army of the dead and kill the walkers before they can retreat." "That's suicide," Ned said flatly. "So is sitting here waiting for them to overwhelm us." Jon met his father's eyes. "I'll lead it. Me and volunteers. We go tonight before they can regroup." "Jon, it's the only way. You know it is." Jon's voice was steady. "And it has to be me. I know how they fight. I know what we're facing. And I have—" He stopped. "You have what?" Ned asked. Jon hesitated, then said quietly, "I can feel them. In my head. Like there's a connection. Ghost can sense them too. It's how we know when they're close. How we always know where they are." Ned stared at his son, his nephew. "That's not normal. Nothing about this is normal. But it's an advantage. I can track them, find them, kill them before they know we're there." "I'm going with you," Barristan said. "Sir Barristan, I'm 62 years old. I've lived longer than I had any right to. I've served 3 kings, won a war, and fought ice demons at the end of the world. If I'm going to die, I'd rather it be doing something that matters." Barristan smiled. "Besides, someone needs to keep you alive long enough to finish this." "I'll go too," Robb said, appearing from the shadows, with ice and 50 of our best men. Wanted to order them all to stay, wanted to find another way, but there was no other way. "All right," he said finally, "but you take 100 men, not 50, and you take every piece of Valyrian steel we have, and you come back alive, all of you. That's an order." "Yes, Father," Jon and Robb said together. The strike force departed that night. Jon led them north through a secret postern gate in the wall, Ghost padding silently ahead. Behind him came Robb with ice, Barristan with his castle-forged blade reforged from dragonglass, and 100 of the best fighters the living could spare. They moved through the army of the dead like ghosts themselves. The Whites stood motionless, waiting for commands from their masters. The strike force slipped between them, staying low, moving when the dead's attention was elsewhere. 2 hours into the journey, they found the first White Walker. It stood alone near a frozen stream, its pale blue eyes scanning the darkness. Jon signaled. 3 men with dragonglass arrows fired simultaneously. The walker shattered like ice, and the Whites near it collapsed. "It works," Robb breathed. "Gods, it actually works." They pressed on. By dawn, they had killed 3 more walkers and were deep into the haunted forest. The dead's army was disorganized now, large sections of it standing motionless with no one to command them. And ahead, through the trees, Jon could sense something massive, something ancient and powerful, and absolutely terrifying. "There," he said, pointing. Through a gap in the trees, they saw it, the Night King. He was larger than the other walkers, his armor made of ice so clear it was nearly invisible. He sat on a dead horse, surrounded by a dozen White Walker lieutenants, and behind him stood the heart of the army, perhaps 50,000 Whites, all waiting for his command. "That's their leader," Jon said. "Kill him, and the whole army falls." "You're certain?" Barristan asked. "No, but it's the best guess we have. Good enough for me." Barristan drew his sword. "If we're doing this, we do it fast, before they can react." The charge was suicide, and glory in equal measure. 100 men screaming a battle cry, weapons raised, running at the heart of the army of the dead. The Night King turned, his pale eyes widening, the first expression any of them had seen from a White Walker. The Whites moved to intercept, but they were too slow. The strike force punched through, Valyrian steel and dragonglass cutting through animated corpses like wheat. Jon reached the Night King first. Longclaw swept in a horizontal arc, catching the Night King's blade, ice against Valyrian steel, frost against fire. The Night King was fast, inhumanly fast. His ice blade came within inches of Jon's throat before Ghost leaped from the side and tore at the walker's leg. The distraction was enough. Robb came from the other side, ice swinging in a massive overhead blow. The Valyrian steel blade sheared through the Night King's armor, through his body, through his spine. The Night King shattered, and across the entire battlefield, from the wall to the haunted forest to every frozen waste beyond, the army of the dead collapsed. 100,000 Whites falling to the ground like puppets with cut strings, the remaining White Walkers shattering, as whatever magic had bound them dissolved. In the space of a heartbeat, the long night ended. Jon stood among the fallen bodies, breathing hard, hardly believing they'd survived. "Is it over?" Robb asked, his voice small. "I think so," Jon said. Then, louder, "I think we won." The strike force erupted in cheers. Men who had expected to die, who had made peace with death, suddenly realizing they would live to see another sunrise. Barristan cleaned his blade carefully. "That was either the bravest or stupidest thing I've ever done. Possibly both." "It worked," Jon said. "That's all that matters." They returned to the wall as heroes. The army of the living met them with such celebration that it echoed across the north. And when Ned embraced his sons, both of them, Jon and Robb, together, he allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they had truly won. Finally, Pylog. 2 years later, Ned Stark stood in Winterfell's Godswood and watched Jon prepare to leave. His son, his nephew, was going to Dragonstone. Stannis had asked Jon to serve as a liaison with the wildlings who had settled in the Gift, the lands south of the wall that had been granted to the refugees who fought in the Long Night. It was important work. Necessary work. and Jon had earned the right to choose his own path. "You don't have to go," Ned said quietly. "I know, but I want to." Jon adjusted Ghost's collar. The direwolf had grown massive, large enough to ride if necessary. "The wildlings trust me. Stannis trusts me. And I need to do something. After everything that happened, I can't just sit still." "I understand." Ned paused. "Before you go, there's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you years ago." "What?" And Ned, standing before the heart tree with its weeping red eyes, finally told Jon Snow the truth. About Lyanna, about Rhaegar, about the Tower of Joy and the promise Ned had kept for 17 years. About who Jon really was. When he finished, Jon was crying silently, his hand on Ghost's head for support. "I'm not your bastard," he said. "I never was." "No, you're my nephew, Lyanna's son, the last true-born heir of House Targaryen." Ned gripped his shoulders. "But Jon, you're also my son, in every way that matters. I raised you, I loved you, I protected you. That makes you mine as much as any blood. Does anyone else know? Howland Reed? He was there at the Tower of Joy. And now you. That's all." Ned paused. "What you do with this knowledge is your choice. You could press a claim to the throne. You have more right than Stannis by pure bloodline. Or you could keep the secret and live as Jon Snow. Either way, I'll support you." Jon was quiet for a long time. Finally, he said, "I don't want the throne. I never wanted anything except to belong. To be part of something." He looked at Ned. "Can I still call you father?" "Always." And when Jon rode out of Winterfell the next morning, he rode not as a bastard or a secret prince, but as Jon Snow, son of Eddard Stark, hero of the Long Night, and a man finally at peace with who he was. Ned watched him go, then returned to his family. Catelyn waited in their chambers. Sansa was planning her wedding to a northern lord, not Joffrey, not anyone from the south, but a good man who made her laugh. Arya was training in the yard with Brienne of Tarth, who had come north seeking service and found a kindred spirit. Bran was learning to be lord of a holdfast under Maester Luwin's guidance. Rickon was simply being a boy. The family was whole. The realm was at peace. The dead were defeated. And Eddard Stark, who had demanded trial by combat when he should have died, who had won a war and saved the Seven Kingdoms twice over, finally allowed himself to rest. Winter had come. The pack had survived. And that, in the end, was all that mattered. Let us know what you'd like to see next. The end.